This dude opened his eyes with zero clue where he was. His classmate shoved him. The teacher caught him sleeping in class. The whole room burst out laughing. Of course, the class idiot got caught snoozing again. Then the teacher came over and asked if her class was that boring. But Blair couldn't believe what he saw in her eyes. Who is this boring chick? Those curves are anything but boring. Check out that geometry. Perfect spheres. The teacher didn't like that look, grabbed him by the ear, pointed him to the board, and forced him to solve the problem. The dude's mind was still foggy thanks to that perfect geometry. He had to use his special technique to calm down and get the blood flowing from down there back up to his brain. Blair finally saw the problem. Add up all the numbers from 1 to 100. Teacher Brittany yelled at him to hurry up. If he was sleeping, he should know everything about the lesson. Laugh more. Blair was known as the dumbest in the group, but once he chilled out, his whole vibe changed. He got so confident he actually left the teacher speechless. When he wrote the answer on the board, the teacher couldn't believe it. Blair didn't brag, just said he needed to hit the bathroom to take care of something. The classmates were stunned. Could that answer really be right? The teacher of those perfect curves was impressed. How did he do that math in his head? Outside the classroom, we find out the truth. Blair has no idea what's going on. This body isn't his. His real name is Chen Luo, a world-famous math professor, a genius who became the youngest teacher in history. He doesn't know how he died, let alone how he ended up in this mediocre student's body. Plus, it looks like they don't even use basic math formulas here. Is this even his world? If not, he might be the brightest person alive right now. Determined to find out if he's going to be this world's Isaac Newton, our protagonist doesn't notice a girl in the hallway. They bump into each other. Bam! Like a bowling ball hitting a pin. Blair's head hurts, but he feels something super soft in his hand that honestly made it all worth it. He leans back when he realizes what's up and offers the girl his hand. She's furious. Blair, you again. Blair, confused, just asks, do we know each other? The girl turns red as a tomato trying to cover her treasure while yelling. You did the same thing on the first day of class, always touching me and trying to look under my skirt. He's as arrogant and pretentious as ever. She threw so many insults at this dude Blair that our protagonist froze from secondhand embarrassment. He tried to explain, but the girl was set on wiping his memory in a not-so-friendly way. She started conjuring fire magic. Blair quickly tried a new tactic. If I'm really that weak and pathetic, it's not just cowardice to hit me. The girl wasn't listening. She was ready to erase his memories. With no options left, Blair went straight for honesty. He apologized to the gorgeous lady with insane proportions and swore he didn't see the color of any white underwear. The girl was totally shocked. Actually, she calmed down. But before she could say a word, the culprit was gone, running away from the blonde as fast as his legs could carry him. While running, he starts processing the madness of this world, where science and magic exist side by side. Suddenly, a sharp headache hits him, and he collapses to his knees on the grass. His consciousness starts fading, his body goes limp, and he loses consciousness on the ground. Then, our protagonist's mind flashes back to childhood memories, where he's seen calling his dad. The scene shifts to a reflection in a puddle showing some people in front of a palace. A man hands a beautiful box to a woman calling her his love and trying to comfort her. Right after, the woman grabs a kid by the arm and rushes into a big 2-story house. Inside, while she's busy with her stuff, she overhears 2 women gossiping. They say the lady and the kid were nobles, but the man supporting them had died. The memory moves forward and now we see a kid happily running to tell his mom he got accepted into Chananaza Academy. That kid was Blair. His mom, worried, warns him about the dangers he'll face at the academy. Looking at her son, she remembers her late husband and realizes how much they look alike. After that, the memories jump to his life at the academy, where our protagonist was constantly disrespected by his teachers. He's determined to pay off his family's debts. After all, he comes from a noble family that went bankrupt, so he has to work twice as hard. The problem is the dude was born without any magical power, can't even make a tiny fireball. Because of that, his life at the academy was hell. Everyone mocked his failures, which put our guy into a deep depression. Then out of nowhere, he wakes up face to face with a blue-haired girl. She calls him worried, asking if he's okay. Blair is totally confused, wondering who this girl is and how she found him there. The girl reaches out her hand to help him and says he needs to get to his magic theory class. Our dude gets up leaning on her for support and thanks her, a bit surprised. Nobody cares about him. When they get to the classroom, the magic theory class is already in session. The teacher is talking about the 4 basic elements. While listening to the explanation, the main guy starts to get how things work in this world. You're either born a mage or you're a peasant. Meanwhile, the teacher, a guy with gray hair, keeps going with his lesson. He says mages use spells, gestures, and spiritual power to control the elements. But to pull it off, you gotta be born with the gift. Time passes and the class finally wraps up. The students leave the classroom all hyped, celebrating the end of class. After the lecture, The teacher notices someone stayed behind to ask a question. He looks and sees it's Blair and asks without much surprise, "What do you want to know?" Blair asks the teacher if it's possible to learn magic without being born with a talent. The teacher shuts that down immediately, saying it's impossible to control the elements without the natural gift. Right then, the classmates still in the room start laughing at him, because everyone knows the main dude has no power. Then, a guy named Toby steps up and tries to cheer him on. He tells Blair that even if he doesn't graduate, there's always a spot for him in Toby's dad's lands. Hearing that name, the protagonist remembers this chubby dude was the only friend of the previous owner of his body. After their chat, Toby flashes a big smile. They say their goodbyes in a friendly way, waving at each other. Suddenly, Blair notices the blue-haired girl staring at him. He asks if she needs something. The girl gets super nervous and bolts out of the room, but not before telling him that Professor Brittany said to come to her office after class. He keeps thinking about that girl. She wasn't glued to him all day. It seemed like she wanted to say something. The guy realizes that even though he's a math genius, that won't help much in a magic world if he's got no powers. With a flicker of hope, he decides to try using the little magic he has to summon a flame. He looks at his own hand, focuses, and tries the fireball technique, hoping something will happen. His hope is fading fast and desperation starts creeping in, because it looks like he failed again. But then, out of nowhere, his hand bursts into a bright orange flame. The dude is totally stunned, staring in awe at the fireball in his palm. He doesn't get it, just sees that yellow glow shining there. He can't believe it's real, because as far as he knew, this new body had no magical power. But he can't deny it. He has to face the truth and even lets out a relieved sigh. Right after, our guy starts messing around with his new power, then stops and wonders how this ability popped up out of nowhere. Does he think it happened because the worlds somehow crossed? Suddenly, he remembers he needed to talk to the teacher. He heads to her office, knocks, and hears a voice inside telling him to come in. Apologizing for bothering her, our guy steps into the math teacher's office, but when he looks inside, his eyes go wide and he blushes like crazy. He finds the teacher, who's pretty attractive, in a really weird pose and just stands there staring. But she doesn't even seem to notice his reaction and greets him cheerfully. At this point, the protagonist is still frozen, just staring. The teacher, totally chill, tells him not to mind the scene because she always does her calculations in that position. Blair, still a bit flustered, asks why she called him. The blonde then asks him to sit in the chair next to her desk. She steps away for a moment, then comes back and puts a pen and paper in front of him. The guy looks down at the paper and sees it's a new math problem he has to solve. As he gets ready to start, the teacher says she's stepping out for a second, but without missing a beat, he blurts out the answer right there. The teacher looks at him amazed, asking what he just said. He repeats the same number, confirming it's the right answer. Suddenly, the blonde rushes over, grabs him by the shoulder, and starts asking, all worked up, how he solved it. Cause for her, that problem takes forever. She looks kind of mad and asks if he'd solved that problem before, even though she picked the number 79 at random. The protagonist asks if she really wants to know the answer. She insists, half joking, that he tell her how he did it again. His gaze involuntarily drops to her chest and, a little shy, he agrees to explain everything. He's even surprised, thinking to himself that, deep down, his teacher is kinda naive. Wasting no time, he dives straight into the explanation. He says he saw the teacher solve the problem by adding the numbers one by one. He says that's a pretty risky approach and it's easy to mess up, but props to her, cause her calculations were actually correct. She looks at her papers totally confused and says that's the only way she knows how to solve it. Our guy flashes a big grin and says she's wrong. He starts explaining a new way where you first have to find a pattern. According to him, you just take the first number with the last, the second with the second to last, and so on. Adding these pairs always gives you 80. He asks the teacher how many pairs of numbers that add up to 80 are in the problem. The blonde jumps out of her chair and yells the answer, 39. The guy immediately praises her and tells her to sit down, but then quickly apologizes, saying it was out of habit. He continues the explanation, saying that this way the problem stops being a big sum and turns into a simple multiplication. He shows that with this method she can also find the solution really fast. The teacher, excited to have learned something new, happily declares that this is a wonderful way to solve the problem. Plus, she herself comments that this method could probably be improved. The guy praises her knowledge and starts explaining that there is indeed an improvement to this method. After his explanation, the blonde just freezes, trying to process the logic of everything that was happening. Seeing her completely frozen, our guy shouts her name worriedly. He realizes that the basic math of his world is way too advanced for her. Finally, she reacts and looks away, a bit discouraged, asking if he came up with that method by himself. The protagonist dodges the question and just says he created the method to make calculations easier. In his head, he thinks she'd never understand if he mentioned the name Goss. Suddenly, the teacher grabs his hand and calls him a genius. For our protagonist, the scene feels pretty romantic. She says a bright future awaits him if they keep studying together. The guy blushes bright red, says her name, and tries to say something. The teacher senses the vibe, gets embarrassed, and quickly walks away in another direction. But then, out of nowhere, her expression changes as an idea pops into her mind. Very excited, she suggests that Blair become an incredible mathematician. His answer is a quick no. With a look full of ambition, he shouts that he wants to become an incredible wizard. She looks at him confused and asks, why? Then the teacher slams him down on the table and says he should be studying math, not wasting his talent. She tells him that as a mathematician he could have a good position in society and that he should choose that path, not magic. Ignoring her, he forcefully brushes her hand away. Our protagonist says what matters to him is magic and that he wants to be a wizard, not a mathematician. In his opinion, being a great mathematician in this world is way too easy. He'd just have to drop some already existing math theories. He feels doing that would be stealing other people's ideas and that magic is way more interesting. After thinking for a moment, the teacher suggests they make a bet. She tells Blair there's an upcoming magic exam at the academy, which will decide if he can stay or not. Our guy gets thoughtful and notes that if he fails, he'll be expelled. The teacher confirms this and says if he really wants to be a wizard, he needs to pass this exam no matter what. Silence falls and the guy just looks at her with an unreadable expression, thinking about something. Then the teacher grabs a calendar from the desk and continues, explaining the bet. She says if Blair passes the exam, she'll stop pushing him to become a mathematician. But if he doesn't pass, she'll help him get a teaching assistant position so he can stay at the academy and study math. After explaining everything, she asks if he accepts the bet. In her mind, she's sure the guy won't pass because he has no magical ability. Without showing emotion, but with a very confident look in his eyes, the student accepts the bet. In the hallway, the guy thinks about how stubborn the teacher is and complains that she's always correcting him. He starts replaying the previous scene in his head, imagining it way more romantic than it actually happened. Noticing these dirty thoughts, he decides to distract himself by going to practice some magic. But then, out of nowhere, a girl with ribbons comes running at him full speed. They have an unpleasant collision and both hit their heads. After that, they both start falling to the ground at the same time. Our protagonist thinks the situation feels familiar and then feels something in his hand. When the pain fades, he opens his eyes and finds a girl sitting on top of him. The blonde realizes his hand is on her chest and immediately starts hitting our guy. Angry, she decides to use magic and starts preparing a fire spell. Out of nowhere, an orange fireball appears in her hand, but then she realizes no one is in front of her anymore. The girl gets furious, cursing how the guy disappeared again. Far away, our protagonist sighs in relief, thinking that if he hadn't gotten out of there at the speed of light, he'd already be roasted. A little later, the same girl with ribbons in her hair goes to talk to the math teacher. She comes in complaining that she ran into a pervert twice in the same day at the academy. After venting, she gets even angrier and swears that next time she finds that pervert, she'll attack him with a fireball without thinking twice. The teacher finds the situation a bit funny and lets out a small laugh. The girl, whose name is Isabella, quickly changes the subject. She says she already finished the math problem the teacher assigned her. Proud as hell, she mentions she solved it all in one night and brags, thinking no one could have done it faster. The teacher even praises her effort but bursts her bubble by saying some guy named Blair solved the same task in just 1 minute. Isabella is left speechless, totally confused, and asks how he managed to do it so fast. The teacher explains there's a specific math theory for it and offers to show her. Then the teacher starts explaining exactly how Blair's method works. After class, Isabella has that look like she's still processing everything, but little by little, she begins to get the logic behind the theory. Then she realizes something and gets shocked. She can't believe Blair himself came up with it. Right then, Isabella decides she has to meet the genius who created this theory. She asks the teacher about him. Her eyes light up with excitement, waiting for an answer. The teacher finds her whole reaction kinda weird but agrees to introduce them. Not long after, Isabella just kicks open the classroom door and storms in. She starts yelling in front of everyone, asking for the guy named Blair. She makes it super clear she really wants to meet him. One of Blair's friends, totally shocked, is about to speak up but suddenly gets a sharp pinch on the thigh to shut him up. And who pinched him? None other than Blair, who was hiding under the table. The chubby friend immediately gets the hint and makes up a story for Isabella, saying Blair just went to work. She gives him a confused look, like, "Are you serious?" and throws a rhetorical question. Seeing it's useless, she gives up and asks the guys to tell Blair when he gets back. Her friend makes a small hand gesture, super relieved, and promises to pass the message. As soon as Isabella leaves, the classroom door slams shut. Only then does Blair decide to come out from under the table, making sure the blonde girl really left. After that whole scene, a super awkward silence falls over the room and the whole class just stares at Blair with a "What the hell was that?" look on their faces, not understanding why he suddenly became the center of attention. He asks his friend why everyone's staring. In response, his friend, who has a bandage on his face, just grabs his shoulder tightly. His friend, with a desperate look, asks Blair to tell him what happened between him and that girl, Isabella. Blair is totally lost, completely confused by the guy's reaction. Seeing this, his friend shoots him a look like, "Are you crazy?" and asks if the main dude has any idea who that girl is. Our guy gets a bit cautious and carefully asks who the girl who just barged in is. His friend starts explaining she has tons of connections that could cause serious trouble, but Blair just ignores it, replying that no one can touch him inside the academy. Then his friend, who already sees this is going to go south, asks the name of the academy. Blair answers indifferently. The next question is about the campus location, and our guy, totally chill, says it's on Baker Avenue, and that's when the bomb drops. His friend tells him the campus is in Yabo City and the mayor there is none other than Isabella's dad. That's when Blair finally gets it. He understands the huge mess he's in and starts freaking out, wondering what to do. He realizes he's in trouble and asks his friend if he can just apologize to the girl. But out of nowhere, a shout from the back of the room calls Isabella's name, and they both turn around surprised. It's a blonde guy with his crew staring at our guy. He says a nobody like Blair won't last 2 days there. This blonde dude is named Burr, a guy who always bullied our protagonist in the past. Blair's friend tries to defend him, but inside thinks the blonde is totally right. He thinks that because in that academy, if you don't have skills, you get no respect, and to make things worse, all second-year students have to take a test. Anyone who fails gets expelled. In theory, the magic test is super simple. Anyone should be able to pass easily. Only one problem: Blair has 0 magic skills. For him, this test means the end of the road. Suddenly, he's snapped out of his thoughts by a loud bang on a nearby table. It's Boater, yelling furiously at Blair, asking if he's deaf or what. The vibe gets tense instantly and the blonde starts insulting him nonstop. Our protagonist's friend doesn't let it slide. His expression hardens as he gets ready to clap back at Boater. The blonde is challenged to a fight right then for being so cocky and rude, but he's totally confused, asking, what does Blair's friend have to do with this? A guy named Toby. With all this, the tension between them explodes and they're one step from throwing punches. Burr, with a furious look, promises he won't forget this. He turns and leaves with his friends, saying next time Blair's gonna pay for everything. Our protagonist just watches, looking kinda pale as the bullies leave the room. He's even surprised to see Toby. His chubby buddy defended him like a true friend. Straight up, Blair asks Toby to help him with his Isabella. If any trouble starts, Toby agrees, but warns that by then he'll probably have already punched Blair himself. After that, Blair just stares at his friend with a totally confused look. A few days later, finally, the magic exam begins. The teacher announces the rules and warns that anyone who fails is out of the academy. The task is simple. Students must stand behind a line and hit a target with a fireball. The exam kicks off with Burr, who walks in super confident, making it clear he's the best there. He conjures a fireball quickly and hits the target dead on. The instructor praises the guy and says he passed the exam. The test keeps going with everyone taking their turn. Suddenly, in the middle of the crowd, the blonde bully spots our main dude and his friend and lets out a mocking laugh. He walks up to Blair and smirks, telling him to enjoy his last few minutes at the academy. Annoyed by the taunt, Blair's chubby friend tells the blonde to shut up. And what a coincidence, the next one called is none other than Toby. Without wasting a second, he starts preparing the fireball spell. Suddenly, a small orange flame appears in his hand. He shouts the spell's name and launches the fireball. It flies out and barely grazes the target. The instructor, not too excited, says Toby passed, though just barely. The guy's hyped, he made it. Then the instructor checks his list to see who's next. He's about to call Blair, but then remembers the kid doesn't even have magic power. Feeling sorry for our guy, the instructor tries to avoid embarrassing him in front of everyone, so he just starts wrapping up the exam, pretending he forgot about Blair. But then the blonde bully yells at the instructor not to end the test yet. He points out there's still a student who hasn't taken the exam. The guy points straight at our protagonist and shouts loud enough for everyone to hear that he's already failed. Blair just stands there, silent and still, waiting to see what the instructor will do. The instructor, a bit uncomfortable, asks the kid if he's going to take the exam. The blonde bully's friends hear this and burst out laughing, mocking Blair. While the crowd murmurs about the protagonist, a math teacher walks by. Blair's friend tries to cheer him up by putting a hand on his shoulder and telling him to just ignore the idiots. But out of nowhere, our guy's whole vibe changes. With a look full of confidence, he decides he's going to take the exam after all. The blonde kid and his crew are totally shocked by this, not understanding what Blair's talking about. The surprise quickly fades and everyone bursts out laughing, mocking our protagonist and already counting on his failure. All the noise catches the math teacher's attention, who gets curious and comes closer to check it out. The magic instructor, annoyed by the commotion, tells everyone to calm down. Blair is asked one last time if he's sure he wants to take the test. Our guy, with a determined look, tells Professor Antonio he's ready. The instructors, still trying to be kind, tell him not to feel bad if he ends up failing. The protagonist stands in front of the target and focuses. He takes a deep breath, thinking about the best way to impress this crowd. He's insanely confident and knows he doesn't need spells or hand gestures to get what he wants. Just to keep up appearances, he decides to fake it anyway. He shouts the name of the fire spell, and everyone looks at the target, holding their breath. Our protagonist pretends he's struggling hard to summon the magic. The crowd around even covers their faces from the smoke coming off him, trying not to get burned. When everyone opens their eyes, they look at Blair's hands and see no sign of magic at all. The blonde kid and his friends see this and start laughing hysterically, thinking our guy totally screwed up. But out of nowhere, a flash of fire appears in his hand and rings of fire spread around him. A huge fireball forms and shoots straight at the target. When the spell hits the target, there's a massive explosion of flames. Absolutely everyone there, including students and teachers, stares in shock with their mouths wide open. After the fireball, the target is nothing but a pile of smoking rubble. The magic teacher, totally stunned, says Blair passed the exam. The blonde's face completely changes and he says it's impossible because even he couldn't get a result like that. Only Toby is genuinely happy for his friend, asking why he'd been hiding so much talent. Suddenly, the professor calls our protagonist for a talk. The math teacher is also there, totally surprised, wondering how the kid managed to pull that off. Blair goes to the magic teacher's office and starts telling a story about how he trained every day with books, and that's how he mastered the fireball spell. Professor Antonio explains that magic is a gift from the gods and that people without abilities were called the Forsaken by God, and everyone had assumed Blair was one of them. But now it seemed like the gods had rewarded Blair with this gift, which was insanely rare. He praises our main dude and pushes him to keep studying, telling him he's got mad potential. Our guy thinks to himself, totally fed up, that every teacher at this academy is just trying to force-feed him knowledge. Then out of nowhere, he says he appreciates the compliment but wants to go back to his own world. The teacher looks totally lost and asks what world he's talking about. Our protagonist instantly realizes what he just said and tries to cover it up, saying it was just a joke that slipped out by accident. But Anthony doesn't buy it and just thinks he's been hitting the books too hard. He assumes Blair was talking about the world of the sacred master legends. The moment he hears about this master, our guy gets super interested in what the teacher's saying. According to the legend, there was a sacred master who could control space and travel to other worlds, but everyone thinks it's just a myth. Our MC looks at the teacher with wide eyes and starts asking more about these legends. Suddenly, he grabs the old man by the shoulders and declares he needs to become a sacred master. Some time passes and Blair starts seriously studying the history of this world. He stays up late in the library, burning all his energy, flipping through tons of books. From the info in the books, he finds out there are different power levels for mages in this world. In total, there are 7 different levels. Sacred masters were only mentioned in myths and legends. Their magical abilities were only described in ancient texts. Many old books say the holy masters had spatial magic and could open space to travel between worlds. People nowadays think that's just a legend and other worlds don't exist, but our protagonist still holds on to hope that this is his way back home. The problem is Professor Anthony doesn't believe any of it, so he's not going to get much info from him. At that moment, the library admin walks up to Blair and asks how his studies are going. Blair gets a bit nervous when the admin tells him to stop just reading and help out with some library work. With no other choice, our guy agrees to take a break from the books. After his shift, he's totally wiped out because he had no clue working in a library could be so tough. When his shift ends, it's time for class. The moment our protagonist steps into the room, a weird silence falls over the place. Everyone's whispering about his exam results since he did shockingly well. The buzz won't stop and this sudden popularity starts to weigh on him. Suddenly, he spots Isabella out of the corner of his eye and freezes. He doesn't get why this girl is there and just stares at her, barely breathing. The blonde is sitting in a kind of weird pose, which makes our guy super nervous. He even tries to turn away so he doesn't have to look. Suddenly, Isabella stands up and yells so the whole class can hear that she didn't know that guy was Blair himself. Seeing things were about to get worse, the protagonist tries to calm the situation and shut down the conversation, but the girl immediately cuts him off and calls him a pervert in front of everyone. Blair still tries to find a way to calm the blonde down, but then he sees fire starting to form around her. She focuses all her power in her hands, prepping a fire spell without knowing what to do. The scared kid can only curl up and cover his face with his hands, but he doesn't feel a thing. Surprised, he opens his eyes to see why the attack never hit him. Right in front of him is the math teacher who stopped the clueless student. The teacher, with a disappointed look, asks Isabella why she's using magic inside the classroom. The mayor's daughter even tries to explain herself, but the teacher cuts her off before she can say a word. Right after that, the teacher calls Blair to her office and doesn't stop there. She decides Isabella has to come too. Not wanting more trouble, Our guy agrees and calmly heads to the teacher's office. The two students and the teacher quickly leave the room, slamming the door behind them. After that crazy scene, all the students stay silent, trying to process what just went down. A blonde kid in class was in shock, not getting why Blair was getting so much heat. Meanwhile, in the teacher's office, our guy explains all the awkward stuff that happened with Isabella. The teacher tries to get them to make up, saying it was all a big misunderstanding. Under the teacher's pressure, the blonde girl ends up agreeing to forgive the guy. Then, the teacher switches topics, mentioning the magic exam and praising the protagonist for his effort, saying the bet between them was officially over. She says she was really intrigued by his performance and asks him to show how he managed to evolve from nothing and gain magical skills. Our guy brushes her off, saying it was just luck and that he actually has some questions for her about magic. The blonde doesn't push it and just waits, curious to see what he's going to ask. Then she drops the question. To use an element, do you really need to do hand gestures and say spells? Isabella, who never misses a chance, butts into the convo to mock the protagonist, calling his question dumb. Realizing his question sounded kind of silly, Blair, a bit awkward, asks if there's any exception among wizards. The teacher starts explaining that even the most powerful mages need spells and gestures. The only difference is they can do it way faster. She goes on saying magic is a gift from the gods. They were the ones who taught people to use gestures and spells to summon elements. To do it without any of that, a person would need what they call divine enlightenment. The student finds the question so ridiculous she asks why the teacher is taking it so seriously. The protagonist starts wondering if, since he's from another world, the gods here just overlooked him. All this was basic magic knowledge, and if he wanted to be a mage, he'd have to study the theory first. But the teacher called him for another reason, one the girl already mentioned. She hands him a folded paper and explains it's a scientific journal where the most important works get published. Isabella, who was nearby, glances at the journal and is totally shocked. She notices the math professor's name next to our guy's and reacts way over the top. The teacher explains she understood the summation method the guy demonstrated and even wrote an article about it. But the black-haired dude can only think about one thing. If he's going to make any cash from this publication, since his library salary was a total joke, and like she read his mind, the teacher suddenly calls him by name, hands him a small bag of money, and says it's his reward for the work. It was a huge amount, covering more than 2 years of the salary he made at the library. With barely hidden joy, he pretends to be embarrassed to accept it and offers half the money to the teacher. Naively, she immediately accepts the offer and takes half the money for herself. Blair's face drops instantly. She never expected her to actually take his money. The pain is massive because he only offered it out of courtesy. With one sentence, he lost half of all the money he'd earned. Because of this, he started having dark thoughts about needing to get out of this world as soon as possible. But suddenly something grabs his attention and he stares at the teacher with new interest. He wants to know if every article published in that scientific journal pays the same amount. In response, he hears yes, the payment is per article published, and suddenly a bright idea pops into his head, one he just has to share. He suddenly starts explaining a new theory, one he brought from his old world. The teacher realizes what he's talking about and calls it the hugest enigma. Our guy, who isn't too familiar with this world's science, gives the girl a confused look. She explains that Ralph's riddle is a math problem created by some ancient sages. The story goes like this. Ralph has 7 sons. Each son has 7 bags. Each bag has 7 cats and each cat has 7 kittens. The problem itself doesn't involve huge numbers. If you just add everything up, you get the answer. But the thing is, if the numbers were bigger, it'd be really good to have another way to solve it. So the blonde, genuinely interested, asks if he can solve Ralph's enigma using a different method. With a confident look, he replies he has some ideas about it. The girl feels super inspired by his answer and asks to work with him on this new method. Time passes as they work, and after a few hours, the student who'd been in the office the whole time ends up falling asleep in her chair. Suddenly, she's woken up by a scream right next to her. The one screaming is the teacher. She's jumping for joy, saying our guy finally solved the problem. Isabella, surprised, asks the protagonist if he came up with the idea himself. He, in turn, shoots her a sly look and asks if she really wants to know the answer. The blonde is insanely curious and insists on knowing. In response, he says he has no special skills, just studies like crazy. The girl, mouth wide open, asks if he's telling the truth. A while later, she keeps thinking about what he said. Suddenly, something unexpected happens right in front of her, leaving her shocked. She sees the protagonist in the 3rd-year building and wonders what he's doing there since he's a 2nd year. She promises herself she'll catch him in the act this time, but before she knows it, he's out of sight again. By this point, the protagonist is already near a tall stone wall behind the 3rd-year building. This was the place Toby had told him about, hoping his friend wouldn't do something dumb. With a light jump, our guy vaults over the wall and suddenly remembers his magic teacher. He said if he wanted to learn about magic, he should go to the Magic Association in Yabo City. Behind the wall is something amazing, and the protagonist freezes for a moment. He soaks it all in, appreciating the city's unique architecture. The area feels chill and imposing, but the main street is buzzing with activity. Merchants on every corner are shouting out to potential customers, trying to sell their stuff. The black-haired dude strolls casually through the city, soaking in its beauty. His eyes lock onto a massive castle with stunning white walls right in the center of it all. He recognizes it instantly. That's the magic association he's been hunting for. Before stepping in, he carefully pulls out some kind of mask from his pocket. Gotta be cautious. Better not reveal his identity unnecessarily. Since the association's entrance was pretty quiet, he heads straight to the main counter. There he meets a blue-haired girl who immediately offers to help. Our protagonist instantly recognizes her as Molly, one of his classmates, and wonders what the heck she's doing working there. The girl offers him the services of a high-level mentor, but the price is insanely high. When our guy hears the cost, he's kinda shocked. He doesn't get it at all. Obviously, he doesn't have that kind of cash, so he just ditches the idea and starts to leave the building. But then Molly calls him back. She says if money's the problem, he can just sign up for the association's library. Bullied turns around, surprised, and even asks again just to make sure he heard right about this library. Turns out the Magic Association's library has thousands of books on the subject, and the best part, it's free. The protagonist, realizing he won't have to spend a single dime to learn, gets hyped and asks to sign up on the spot. But to do that, they ask for a mage certificate, which, unfortunately, he doesn't have. Molly thought he was already a mage and explains that the registration is meant to prove the person actually knows their stuff when it comes to magic. She says he can just prove his skills right there, showing what he can do. The guy's a bit hesitant and asks if it's really possible to take the test right there. It is, but Molly warns him the specialist on duty today is super strict. Apparently, only 10% of people pass his test. Still, our protagonist isn't discouraged and agrees to take the exam, especially since sneaking over the wall again wouldn't be very practical. A little later, they arrive at the examiner's room where a guy named Andrew is waiting. Our dude notices the man's wearing a red mage robe with 2 silver stripes. That means he's a mid-level fire element mage. The mage wastes no time and gets straight to the point, asking who the guy is and why he's wearing that mask. The guy introduces himself as Chen Luo from the previous world and explains the mask is to hide a burn he got while training. The old man sitting beside him makes a sarcastic comment saying his fireballs must be pretty special to have burned his face like that. Andrew, with some interest, finds the guy's name weird and thinks that given his age, he could only be a low-level mage at best. Molly suggests they go to the exam room to test the guy's skills, but she gets a flat no, which leaves her shocked. The examiner says they don't need a room and that the test can be done right there, inviting our guy to show what he's got. Bullied looks at the mage surprised, wondering if he's serious about having to use magic right there. He's confused by the lack of space in the room. The old man mocks him and says Andrew won't be hurt by the pathetic little fireball the guy will probably make. Our dude, for his part, doesn't even bother arguing and just accepts the terms. He stops right in front of the examiner and starts focusing all his magical power into his hand. The mage doesn't like the way the spell is being cast, but to everyone's surprise, a massive amount of power begins to gather in the protagonist's hand. Suddenly, everyone realizes the fireball is going to be huge, and Andrew yells to stop, but it's already too late to cancel the spell and the guy decides to go all out. The whole room lights up with the bright flash of a gigantic fireball. A blinding light covers everything, and the fireball heads straight for the examiner. The guy wasn't expecting that kind of power and tries to hide behind the door. Then, suddenly, a massive explosion rocks that tiny room. After the blast, there's only silence, dust, and smoke everywhere. The girl watching inhales all that soot and starts coughing uncontrollably. She tries to pull herself together to see what happened at the end of the test. Through the black smoke, she sees an old man coughing who seems to have cast some kind of spell. Where the examiner was, there's now a gigantic blue shield protecting him. Meanwhile, Andrew is on the floor, covered in dust, trying to figure out what just happened. So it was the old white-haired man who managed to raise the shield in time and save the bald mage. He's still holding the barrier with a serious look on his face, trying to peer through the smoke. The examiner is so shocked he doesn't even react, and the older mage has to shake him by the shoulders to snap him out of it. The girl just watches the whole scene, completely in shock. Our guy, realizing the confusion, immediately apologizes to the mages. He explains that he thought everyone was ready for his spell, so he went all out. After all that chaos, the protagonist passed the test. A little later, he's in another room, getting his mage certificate and library card. He takes the documents and starts reviewing them. The girl from before approaches and says she was impressed by what he did in front of the examiners. The protagonist, whose name is Chen Luo, thanks her for the compliment, says goodbye, and leaves. The thing is, he called her by her name, and she stands there, confused, trying to remember where they know each other from and how he knew her name. When he arrives at the library, Chen Luo is impressed by the huge number of books. He wastes no time grabbing a book and sitting at an empty table to read. Our guy is surprised because the books really contain a lot of important info. He's mainly interested in those that talk about magical and spiritual power. Basically, a mage's strength is defined by their level of spiritual power. The more spiritual power you have, the stronger your magic is. And that's not all. High-level mages can even control the elements of weaker mages, but the explanation about the 4 magical elements in the books is kind of messy because the knowledge in this world is pretty basic. Mages here believe these 4 elements are the foundation of everything, not just magic, but the whole world. To them, all other elements are just combinations of these 4 primaries. From a modern science perspective, this idea is super outdated. Any student knows matter is made up of various elements from the periodic table, not just 4. But since magic and magical elements are real in this world, the protagonist can't find a scientific explanation for it. Then, out of nowhere, an idea hits him. What if it's possible to interact with magical elements in a different way? Lost in these thoughts, he suddenly jumps out of his chair, surprising everyone in the library. If his theory is right, he could create a new kind of magic. Out of nowhere, he grabs the papers on the table. Without thinking twice, our guy grabs his stuff and bolts out of the library. He needed to test this crazy idea and headed straight to the Magic Association. When he arrives at the association, completely out of breath, he runs down a hallway and the guys who administered his test recognize him. The examiner and an older man were sitting there, still a bit shocked by what they'd seen earlier. To set the scene, a blue-haired girl was serving them tea. This dude Andrew comments that Chen Luo has an extremely low spiritual power, yet he managed to create a huge, super powerful fireball. And the weirdest part is that the old man couldn't even control the element the kid summoned. The mage in the gray robe thinks maybe the kid has some secret they're not getting. It was already getting dark, so the protagonist decides to leave the city and head back to the academy. On the way, he just jumps over a tall stone wall like it's nothing and lands softly on the other side without kicking up a speck of dust. Our guy doesn't want to waste time and decides to try creating that new magic right there. And at that moment, a bunch of ideas start flooding his mind and he struggles to focus and create something different. The protagonist takes a deep breath and suddenly feels a strange energy. A whitish flow, one he doesn't recognize, starts swirling around him. He realizes this energy comes from his own body and that he can control it. He tries to direct this flow of qi to create a second element. A magic orb forms in his hand and transforms into oxygen, but then he's not sure if it's really pure oxygen. There was no way to know just by looking. So, Chen Luo gathers the oxygen he created in his hand, making it denser and more concentrated. He thinks if it's really oxygen, all he has to do is light it on fire to be sure, but the first try fails. He adds fire and only a small puff of smoke comes out of his hand. Not losing hope, he tries the crazy experiment again. He creates the oxygen in his hand once more, compresses it tightly, and lights that thing on fire. Suddenly, a huge explosion goes off around him. The shockwave is so strong it breaks the windows of nearby buildings. To give you an idea, even a glass sitting quietly on the math teacher's desk started cracking completely. The teacher hears the loud noise coming from the street and stops what she's doing to see what happened through the window. Now fully shaken by the shockwave, she sees the explosion that happened near the building. In the middle of a patch of grass, tons of sparks and clouds of smoke rise up. Our guy is right in the middle of the mess trying to breathe the thick smoke that formed around him. The wind starts swirling everything weirdly through the air. Then the protagonist thinks he got super lucky reacting so fast. Suddenly, our guy's face is covered in sweat and he has a look of real fear. He looks to the side trying to figure out how much damage the explosion caused. Apparently, that oxygen was way more powerful than our protagonist had imagined. Suddenly, he hears a voice shouting from afar, asking, "What happened?" Our dude spins around and sees some guy running toward him. He didn't expect it to be so loud. The main guy decides it's better to bounce before he gets into trouble, so he bolts into the forest to hide. Despite the chaos, it looks like Blair managed to create something valuable. A little later, we see him in the classroom thinking about everything that went down. He's wiped out from pulling an all-nighter studying, so he decides to take a quick nap right there at his desk. But peace isn't on the menu for him, and suddenly someone starts slapping him hard on the back. It's Toby, who frantically starts spilling the tea about last night's drama. To avoid suspicion, our black-haired guy says he slept like a rock. Word is there was an explosion near the third-year building that shattered all the windows. Everyone thinks some superpowered mage did it, but no one knows why. Our protagonist says he's never seen a mage like that, and his friend gives him a shocked look, asking what he means by never seeing a high-level mage. After all, their math teacher is a top-tier mage. Hearing this, Blair makes a face of pure shock and even jumps out of his chair. A bit later, our main guy decides to talk to the teacher, and the scene switches to him knocking on her office door. She opens it almost immediately and greets her student. Our dude arrived at the perfect time because she really wanted to talk to him. She tells him the Mathematicians Association already published an article about the Roth enigma, and since he proposed the solution, his name is listed first among the authors. The teacher congratulates him for solving the toughest math problem. Putting that aside, she says she's here to discuss something else. To the blonde teacher's surprise, he says he wants to study math with her and asks for her help. After hearing this, she just stares at him, totally confused. The guy wanted to be a mage, but suddenly decided he also really digs math and doesn't want to regret it later. He even says he feels like he must have been an amazing mathematician in his past life. The teacher, overwhelmed with emotion, grabs his hand and calls him by name. She can't hold back and presses his hand against her chest, saying how happy she is to hear that. She hugs him and says from now on they'll study math together every day after school. Dying of embarrassment, the guy tries to pull away from the hug, gently pushing her with his hands, and takes the moment to ask for help with magic. Also, still totally confused by the scene, he hears her agree to everything and decides to get out of there. As soon as possible, our dude is already sprinting toward the door, desperate to leave. He opens it, but the blonde teacher calls him back, reminding him of their deal for the next day. He just agrees, wanting to run away, but then out of nowhere, she tells him to stop and wait a minute more. So she sits at her desk, clasps her hands, and tries to figure out how to say what's on her mind. Blair is totally confused, nervously watching her. Then the teacher catches on. The black-haired guy only accepted math lessons to get help with his magic. This worries her because she realizes his request wasn't sincere. Seeing he's been caught, the protagonist panics, trying to find a quick excuse, and suddenly comes up with a brilliant idea to get out of it. He suddenly says that since they're going to spend a lot of time together, it'll be easier to ask about magic. But before he can finish his sentence, the teacher's hand slams down hard on his shoulder. She grabs him firmly, and the guy gets super confused, scared about what she's going to say now. But the teacher says he has talent for math and can use it as a tool. Apparently, his answer was enough for her. She tells him to go rest and not to forget to come back after school. Blair thinks to himself this girl is both smart and kinda dumb at the same time. Time passes, and the next afternoon, Blair shows up for his lesson, opens the teacher's classroom door without even knocking, and just walks in. Suddenly, he sees two girls sitting at the front desk chatting. One of them, Isabella, is clearly not happy to see him there, probably because she wanted to talk to the teacher alone. Without missing a beat, she asks him straight up what he's doing there. The teacher then apologizes to Isabella and explains she forgot to tell her. But from now on, Blair will also have classes with her. The teacher asks Isabella to look after the new guy, but judging by her face, she's not thrilled about the idea. The blonde then calls the protagonist over to sit next to the other student and says she's prepared a problem for him. The question was this: if a stone is dropped into a well, a stone twice as heavy. The question is, when will the second stone catch up to the first? Isabella starts to answer, saying they need to know the time between the two drops. But before she can finish, Blair interrupts her. Our guy, without hesitation, says straight up that the second stone will never catch the first. He explains that if you ignore air resistance, a heavier stone won't catch up to a lighter one. His answer leaves the blonde girl sitting next to him, really pissed off. She accuses him of not even knowing the basics. According to her, everyone knows that the falling speed of an object depends on its weight. The heavier it is, the faster it falls. She says this is what the ancient sages discovered and even a kid knows it, but our protagonist doesn't buy it. The look on his face shows he's getting pretty pissed too. He replies that just because a bunch of ancient sages said something doesn't make it true and asks if she's ever seen it happen in real life. The blonde gets annoyed because the guy dared to question the wisdom of the ancients. The vibe between them gets tense since neither wants to back down. Then our protagonist tells them straight up that science has to be precise, and if a truth can't be proven, then it's not a real truth. Another student suggests a bet, but the guy says no. The teacher tries to calm things down, then everyone's like no, and a fight breaks out, but out of nowhere, the mayor's daughter bets 10 gold coins. He accepts instantly. The teacher just puts her hand to her face. Frustrated, she can't stop the black-haired guy. After a while, they find a spot to do the experiment. She tries one last time, saying one stone is twice the size of the other, and they should drop the whole argument, but he stands firm. After all, he wasn't about to pass up easy money. Nobody there believes he's going to win because everyone trusts the ancient sages. The blonde even comments that having confidence is one thing, but being that cocky is another. Right after that, some white wind platforms appear in the air. The teacher steps onto them and starts floating. A wind beside her pushes her up, higher and faster. Our guy, who's never seen flight magic before, just stares at the scene. He and Isabella are down below, watching the teacher rise to the top of the clock tower. Up there, she raises both hands, each holding a stone, one bigger and one smaller. The mayor's daughter already counts it as a win, saying he's definitely going to lose. To make sure the test is fair, the teacher lines both stones at exactly the same height and then drops them. The stones fall freely, and for a second it looks like they're at different heights. They get closer and closer to the ground, speeding up, but suddenly, both stones hit the grass at the same time. The blonde's jaw drops, unable to believe what she's seeing. The guy, on the other hand, just gives a small smile because he already knew the outcome. The teacher up there also has a look on her face like she has no clue what just happened. She casts the spell again and slowly descends to the ground to take a closer look. The two stones are still sitting there on the grass, while the trio just stands there thinking about what just went down. Isabella finally seems to get it, and her face is pure confusion. The two girls can't believe how that was even possible. To them, the ancient sages couldn't have lied. The teacher wonders how it's possible her student knew the law of falling bodies was wrong. Then he explains he read it in a book, but when he tested it with two stones, he saw reality was different from what was written. Turns out a truth adults had taught for over 1,000 years could be disproved just by dropping two stones from a height. It's pretty crazy to think so many scholars never bothered to check if the truths they knew were actually true. The blonde grabs him by the shoulders and says this law was super important in her world and soon a new law will appear in the books with Blair's name on it. The guy isn't thrilled about all this fame he's getting, especially since he wasn't the only one who did the experiment. The teacher tries to calm things down, saying the credit was all his and she only played a small part, but if he wants, he can refine this law along with Isabella, and the girl gets super excited about the idea. Our protagonist replies he'll definitely need her help to finalize the law and invites her to join. Suddenly, all shyness disappears from her face, and she looks at the guy surprised. Her mind starts racing, thinking hard about his offer. She even imagines newspaper headlines announcing two geniuses have appeared at the academy and are working together on a new law. Her face blushes again, thinking about the possibility of working with him. The girl decides not to show what she feels and, trying to act natural, shyly accepts. The blonde is lost in thought for a while, realizing they'll have to work together alone. She starts imagining possible names for the new law, thinking about how their names would be side by side in the title, which makes her blush again. Then, suddenly, she offers to help our protagonist if anyone bothers him at the academy, all while thinking about how smart and handsome he is. Suddenly, the guy holds out his hand and the girl immediately thinks he wants to shake it. This gesture made Isabella blush and feel even a little annoyed, without even understanding why. She decides to ask what he wants with his hand extended and, in response, he asks for 10 gold coins. Our main dude clearly meant something else with that gesture. His eyes start to shine thinking about the cash he was about to score. The girl was super disappointed for totally misunderstanding him and walked away a bit grumpy. In the end, our main dude gets the promised payout from the bet and starts counting the coins. He's hyped about winning 10 gold coins in one challenge and getting rich in a single day. Isabella realizes the guy cares more about money than fame, but she still feels like there's more to the story. Our main dude gets thoughtful after her words and stays silent for a moment. The girl, genuinely curious, decides to ask him what he really wants. This question catches the guy off guard because until now, he hadn't really stopped to think about it. He reflects on everything he's done in this world and suddenly something clicks. Memories from his past life flash through his mind about how he used to grind as a teacher. He remembered his students, his job, and his friends he left behind in a world that no longer exists. After diving into these memories, he finally finds an answer to give the girl. But what he wants apparently isn't something he can just go around saying, so he simply denies it and says he's only in it for the money to live a better life. With a fake smile on his face, he says goodbye to Isabella and the teacher. Not getting the answer she hoped for, the blonde watches the guy thoughtfully as he walks away. She realizes he's carrying some thoughts he can't share with anyone. A day passes and Blair is already sitting in the classroom thinking that sleeping on his desk is way comfier than in his tiny room, but seeing the situation, he concludes that at least now he's got money. He knows he can't just stand still, so he has to keep moving. At that moment, a blonde dude named B slams his hand on the desk and calls Blair out reluctantly. B tells him some guy named Fiji is looking for him. Blair is totally confused and asks who that is because he's never heard that name in his life. Batter doesn't like that answer, gets pissed, and grabs our guy by the hoodie. But suddenly, a voice tells the dude to let Blair go immediately, and nearby appears another blonde guy all dressed up, fixing his tie. Turns out this was Fiji, the big shot who was hunting for our main dude, and he didn't come alone either. He had two seriously looking guys with him, staring at Blair like they wanted to burn him with their eyes. This Fiji dude looks at him with pure contempt. Our guy, on the other hand, is just curious since he's never seen this dude before. The blonde guy in the blue shirt then turns to our main dude and asks if his name is Blair. He sizes Blair up from head to toe and lets out a little sarcastic laugh right in front of him. That's when our main dude gets it. First, with a serious face, he tells the guy to let him go and introduces himself, asking, "What's going on?" The arrogant blonde warns Blair to stay away from Isabella. In his mind, a guy like Blair shouldn't even be near a girl like her. After dropping his message, Fiji tells his crew to leave and they all take off. On their way out, the blonde bumps into Toby, who was just passing by. The chubby kid can't handle the impact and clumsily drops to his knees. He's so scared he doesn't even dare say a word. He just waits silently for the gang to leave. A bit awkward, Toby approaches our main dude and asks if he's okay. Blair says he's fine, that the guys just wanted to talk, but Toby is shocked that Fiji showed up out of nowhere and can't understand why. Then Toby explains the situation. That blonde dude is Fiji, the class president, and everyone at the academy is scared of him. He comes from the famous Howard family and is the son of a viscount. And to make things worse, his dad is a big shot in a secret society, and several teachers here are members too. Toby tries to calm things down, saying he gets that Blair is smitten by Isabella's beauty, but warns his friend not to ignore Fiji's warning. At this point, our guy gets nervous and embarrassed because that's not what he was thinking at all. Time passes, and soon it's noon when classes end. Blair is already sitting with Isabella but is totally distracted thinking about how to properly use his new oxygen technique. The big plus is he won't need magic or hand signs, but the problem is he still doesn't know how to use two elements at once. Isabella snaps him out of his thoughts, telling him to stop slacking off. She tells him to solve the problem the math teacher assigned. Our main dude, yawning from boredom, just hands her a piece of paper. When Isabella looks at the sheet, she sees a bunch of formulas and realizes he had already solved everything a long time ago. She's speechless, since she only managed to solve half the problem in the same amount of time. Our main dude then says, "You can't solve everything the same way." According to him, the secret is finding different ways to think. Ignoring his cocky attitude, she looks at the paper a bit embarrassed. Taking advantage of the silence, our guy remembers he wanted to ask her something. He's curious about how she can summon two fireballs at once, and she replies that she can actually summon a bunch of them. This info totally blows the protagonist's mind, and he just stares at her all confused. The blonde notices the black-haired guy can only throw one fireball at a time and starts mocking him. He explains he's read tons of magic books, but never found anything about summoning multiple spells at once. The girl says those books only cover the basics and don't teach the advanced stuff. To learn that, you'd have to hire a super expensive magic consultant, but she adds that if someone called her sister, she'd help them learn herself. Without missing a beat and with a dead serious face, our protagonist calls his sister right then and there. The girl didn't expect such a quick, straightforward answer and is totally shocked. The blank look on his face when he said the magic word left her completely confused. But a promise is a promise, so she agrees to teach the guy. After that, they ditch the academy and find a more secluded spot to train. The girl focuses and casts the spell. Suddenly, a bunch of yellow fireballs start floating around her. Our guy is totally amazed by the sight since he can barely make two. What really grabs his attention is how stable her spells are. The girl explains the main secret to summoning multiple fireballs is distributing spiritual power. Most people think spiritual power can only focus on one point, but once you master this technique, you can spread your power to different points. Each chunk of power can summon a spell. That's how you summon multiple fireballs. Then the protagonist asks if it's possible to summon different spells using each chunk of power, and she enthusiastically confirms it. While they're talking, a blonde-haired guy watches them from afar. His name is Tyr, and he thinks those two are up to something. Next to him, someone else is gripping a part of the wall so hard they start yelling at each other. The boss nearby also saw the scene and watches nervously. He promises himself the protagonist will pay dearly for this. At that exact moment, our guy is training hard, trying to split his spiritual power into 9 parts. The blonde tells him he needs to follow her instructions and divide his spiritual power step by step. With a smile, she says not to feel bad if he can't do it because it took her 6 months of training to learn. Suddenly, right as she finishes talking, a bunch of fireballs appear around the young guy. The girl looks at the scene confused and asks how he managed that. Totally chill, he replies he just split his spiritual power into 9 parts and summoned the fireballs. But the girl doesn't buy that excuse and asks how he did it so fast. Blair looks a bit surprised and just says he understood the technique and could use it. Such a simple answer leaves the blonde completely stunned. She stands there for a moment staring at the guy. Her face turns red, thinking he's not just a math genius, but also a magic prodigy. Then she gets super pissed because she trained way longer than him. To save face, she decides to lie and say she's done the same before. With her pride hurt, the girl just leaves the training session and runs off. Our guy has no clue why she's so mad and just chalks it up to another one of those "I don't get girls" moments. He puts his hand in his pocket and suddenly feels something weird, stops to check it out. Meanwhile, the girl still isn't calm and is angrily walking back to the academy. Suddenly, Blair runs after her and grabs her arm. Isabella is surprised by the move and asks if he needs something else. That's when she notices his hand is outstretched, offering her something. It's a bracelet with a cute golden cat charm on a red string. The protagonist offers the gift, calling her by name, and tells her to accept it. He says the only reason he learned magic was thanks to her help and thanks her. She looks at the bracelet, breathless, wondering what to do. Her face turns red again and she bites her lip, totally confused, staring at the protagonist. Surprise, She says it actually makes some sense and maybe she's not so dumb after all. Then the blonde snatches the gift from his hand with a quick move, trying not to show how she really feels. She runs off nervously, yelling the gift is ugly, except since she's running with her eyes closed, she trips and falls super awkwardly on the grass. Without even asking for help, she hurriedly gets up, laughing nervously, totally embarrassed. Then she turns to see his reaction. Blair looks surprised and a bit confused by her look, not knowing what to say. But before he can say a word, the girl quickly gets up and leaves again, shouting some insults over her shoulder. She promises she won't give up that easily, but all Blair can do is let out a tired sigh. After all that drama, he decides to take a break and lies down on the grass to chill in the sun. He thinks if she really didn't like it, she wouldn't have accepted the gift. After all, he spent 50 silver coins on that thing. The dude was thinking he originally planned to give the bracelet to his math teacher. But then, out of nowhere, he sees something right in front of him. 3 guys are walking up to our main guy who's lying on the grass. One of them, BT, reminds our dude that the class president already warned him to stay away from that girl, and that getting so close to the mayor's daughter was making the president pretty nervous. Without saying a word, our main guy gets up from the grass with a super serious look. Then, out of nowhere, he turns around and just bolts away from the guys who were bothering him. The blonde dude and his crew weren't going to let that slide, so they took off chasing after him. The thing is, our guy didn't see any reason to fight these jerks, but then one of the 3 decided to open his mouth and say that Blair's dad died like a coward running away in the middle of a battle. Hearing that about his family really hit a nerve, and our main guy stopped dead in his tracks. The blonde dude, seeing his chance, kept mocking him. He thought Blair had let his guard down and tried to sneak a low blow from behind, but when he threw the punch, his fist just froze in midair right in front of our guy's face. The bully did not see that coming at all. Since he threw the punch with all his might, the recoil sent him flying backward, and in the end, he was the only one who got hurt. You could see on Blair's face that he was seriously pissed off at the gang's actions. Meanwhile, the blonde dude could barely stand. His hand was completely burned, and he was in unbearable pain. That just made our main guy even angrier, and he declared that his dad was a brave warrior who died for his homeland. He added that his dad was an amazing father who deserved respect, even in death. Blair then threatened them, saying no one could insult his father. Fueled by rage, 9 fireballs suddenly appeared, floating around him, catching the bullies' attention. They were totally shocked by Blair's skill because as far as they knew, he didn't have any magic. The thought of getting burned alive terrified the guys, and they took off immediately, leaving their leader behind. Now, it was just an angry Blair, and the blonde dude looked at him terrified. What he saw was enough to make him panic and start begging for his life. The bully tried to save his own skin, saying fights were banned at the academy, but all he got was a look of pure contempt. Then, the panic in his eyes faded, replaced by pure desperation. He just stood there frozen, staring at Blair, not knowing what to do. Our guy, with no intention of stopping, raised his hand to launch the fireballs. The magic concentrated and started moving toward the dude, but suddenly our MC felt a presence behind him. Meanwhile, Bader closed his eyes, raised his arms to protect himself, and screamed for help. When he didn't feel any pain, he thought it was weird and decided to open his eyes. In front of him, the 9 fireballs had vanished, and instead, there was a guy collapsed at his feet. Completely confused, he tried to process the scene by looking at Blair, who was just lying there peacefully in front of him. The blonde dude was still in shock but nervously pushed Blair to check if he was still alive. Seeing an opportunity, Burr decided to try escaping before our MC woke up, but he was stopped dead in his tracks by an authoritative voice. Standing in front of him was a math teacher already tending to Blair. The blonde tried to make excuses, claiming it wasn't his fault, and all this time, our MC was still lying on the grass, pretending to be unconscious. The blonde dude kept trying to explain himself, but the crowd didn't buy it. The teacher turned up the pressure, saying she knew exactly how he felt about Blair. The whole pointless argument was interrupted by a guy with a beard and mustache who appeared out of nowhere. He scolded Bader since our black-haired guy was right there passed out on the ground. This just proved the blonde had been lying the whole time. The man then ordered Burr to go straight to his office and wait to face the consequences of his actions. He went to talk with the vice president, saying all this was the academy administration's fault and apologizing for the scene. The 2 men walked away discussing the situation while the girl tried to wake Blair up. She was worried about his condition, but suddenly she felt a strange chill. The protagonist pulled away from her a bit, and his face froze in a mix of embarrassment and some kind of excitement. The girl saw this and thought he really wasn't feeling well, but he replied that he was fine until she basically started suffocating him. She then gave him one of those big motherly hugs and said she was really worried about him. Just then, an older gentleman approached and said all this mess would be sorted out, but they came for another reason. The girl took the lead and decided to introduce the 2 men to Blair. The elder was named Archil, and the younger was Calvin. Our guy bowed respectfully, greeting the 2 academy staff members. Apparently, our black-haired dude was already getting famous and was known as the young guy who helped Professor Brittany solve the Rubos mystery. But the professor interrupts the old man, correcting him that it was Blair himself who solved everything on his own, and she only wrote the report. Thanks to solving this mystery, Blair and the professor have been nominated for the Edwin Award, which is a huge source of pride for the city. And if they want, these guys will do everything they can to help them win. But the girl is more worried about whether our boy can get the award too. The old man sighs as if he expected that question and looks at her. He explains that Blair is still very young and no one in the math world achieves such a feat at his age. If the professor says he was the one who solved the Rubos mystery, simply no one will believe her. The girl is about to start arguing, but the protagonist calls her by her name and takes her hand. She looks at him, her face sad and a little disappointed. Breaking the tension, Archil suggests they discuss this calmly and decide everything later. She agrees and the two men slowly walk away. Time passes and night begins to fall over the academy, bathing the building in a beautiful orange light. The professor and Blair walk down the hallway in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Suddenly, she tells our boy that although the standard solution to the mystery wasn't a big deal, the method he used was a major breakthrough in the history of mathematics. The award has to be his. It makes no sense for someone else to get the credit. This leaves Blair a bit stunned and he quickly looks for something to say. After a moment, he says the award shouldn't be his. Then he adds that, as far as he's concerned, Professor Brittany stopped being a stranger to him a long time ago. The compliment makes the professor blush. She's surprised, but in a good way. Embarrassed by her own reaction, she tells the student to just go home, leaving him wondering what he might have said wrong. A little later, a crowd had already gathered around the bulletin board. Everyone was talking about the paper Professor Brittany published and, of course, about the name of the student who helped. People were impressed, saying scientists had spent centuries trying to solve the Rubus mystery and failed. While everyone was talking about him, our protagonist decided to blend into the crowd to stay unnoticed, and it worked. No one saw him, but then, not far away, he suddenly hears a bunch of yelling and insults coming from a room. He recognizes the old man he had met before and sees someone else in the back of the room. It was Bad and his father. The father was seriously scolding his son for the fight. The man's parenting style was pretty intense, and, to teach him a lesson, he just starts slapping his own son. Our protagonist watches this angrily, but with no intention to get involved. After slapping the kid right there in front of everyone, the blonde's father starts begging Artol for forgiveness, pleading that he not expel his son from the academy. But what Bad did was too serious. He broke the school rules in a major way, without even letting the old man finish speaking. The blonde kid's father falls to his knees, begging with all his might for the director's mercy. He stays there in that position, desperately pleading to let Bad stay despite the mistake he made. Vader is surprised by his father's actions and tells him to get up, but Blair, despite everything, decides to step in. He approaches Artil, greets the director, and is greeted back. Pretending he didn't hear anything, our boy asks the director what happened with Bad. Instantly, the blonde kid's face fills with rage when he sees the black-haired boy decided to get involved. Artil explains that the student caused trouble, broke an important rule, and the academy had already decided to expel him. Swallowing his pride, Bad's father, still kneeling, grabs Blair's sleeve, thinking he can help. He says he'll teach his son a lesson and begs for forgiveness, explaining how hard it was to get his son into this academy. If he gets expelled, his life will be ruined. After all this drama, the black-haired boy just sighs, preparing to speak. He turns to Artil and calmly asks him not to punish the blonde kid so harshly. The bully, hearing this from the same person who had been provoking him, is completely shocked. After hearing the request, the director says the academy can suspend the expulsion for a while. Bad and his father are totally surprised and relieved, but Artil warns that if Bad does something like this again, there won't be a second chance. In response, the blonde kid's father forces his son's head down, making him bow as a sign of respect. Then he orders Bad to thank Blair and Till. Too scared to disobey his father, the blonde kid bows and thanks the director and Blair. The old man accepts the apology and tells both of them to go to class. They reach the auditorium door and our boy is about to open it, but then the blonde kid stops him, asking why he decided to defend him. With his hand on the doorknob, our protagonist stops and thinks for a bit. He explains he only did it because he didn't want Bad to disappoint his own father. The kid looks down, thinking about what Blair said. After that, he turns around and genuinely thanks him. He also tells him to watch out for False because that dude isn't gonna let this slide. Adds that Face's uncle is the academy's vice principal. Later, after class, Blair heads to the library like always, thinking about the crazy day he's had. Suddenly, the librarian shows up at the door with a super serious look, making it clear this wasn't gonna be a chill chat. Our main guy didn't expect to see him there and asks what he's doing. The librarian gets straight to the point and asks if Blair's been in any fights lately. Blair's shocked and totally confused. He asks if something happened. Then he gets hit with the news that he can't work in the library or live in his room anymore. And to make things worse, it's a direct order from the vice principal. After this bombshell, our guy decides to find Professor Brittany, who's been trying to get him and Isabella to a math seminar from the start. Blair explains he can't go because he got kicked out of his room and now has to find a place to crash. In response, the professor invites him to live at her place, saying she's got an extra room. Our dude gets all nervous about the offer, already imagining what living with her would be like. Worried, he asks if it'd be a hassle for her to have him there. She calmly says it's no problem because that way they can study math anytime. Her answer makes sense to him, but he's still blushing like crazy. They seal the deal, and she tells Blair to find her after the dance. Suddenly, Isabella bursts into the room without warning and immediately asks what our guy is doing there. The professor explains that Blair's coming to the seminar with them, and from now on, he'll be living with her. This last bit makes the blonde furious, and she immediately starts complaining. Not getting why her student's flipping out, the professor says Blair's not a bad guy and there's nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, our main dude just stands there wondering why he's getting scolded again. To ease the tension, the professor basically kicks the girl out of the room, telling her and Blair to get ready for the seminar. Then the professor asks if he has clothes for the event, explaining it has to be something formal. Not knowing what to wear, he asks if a magic robe would work. The professor says if he has one, that's perfect. Some time passes, night falls, and the dance begins. Everyone starts showing up little by little, and there's our guy on the red carpet, flanked by two girls in gorgeous dresses. When they arrive, Isabella announces they're here. It's the Howard family mansion, the same place where the Magic Society holds their events. And this Magic Society is a super important organization in the kingdom, so they always use the Howard mansion for everything. Turns out this mansion belongs to their class rep. Later, three guys are standing around, having a pretty heated argument. Right then, Brittany walks up to one of them, the vice president, Calvin. Calvin spots the teacher in Blair's group and enthusiastically greets everyone. Our guy immediately returns the greeting. Isabella, standing next to him, is confused about how they know each other. The vice president then asks Blair to introduce his friends, mentioning they were talking about him. Professor Brittany decides not to interrupt their chat and walks away, saying she'll catch up later. Blair and Isabella enter the mansion, and their jaws literally drop seeing everything around them. Our main dude is amazed by how fancy the party is and heads straight to the food table. Without thinking twice, he starts grabbing tons of snacks and drinks, devouring everything in the blink of an eye. But Isabella is not happy at all with this scene, thinking he's embarrassing them. Suddenly, something catches Blair's attention, and he looks in one direction with a lot of interest. He sees a huge painting on the wall showing two rivers connected by several bridges. The blonde girl explains this is the Howard family's greatest pride, the painting called the Seven Bridges of the Royal Capital. Blair, a bit confused, asks again for the painting's name, making it clear he had no clue what it was. Their conversation is overheard by the homeowner's son, a playboy who, mocking him, starts insulting our main guy for his behavior. Isabella can't stand the guy's attitude and defends Blair, saying he's her guest and deserves respect, but the blonde dude couldn't care less. He keeps insulting Blair for his ignorance since he didn't even know such a famous painting. Isabella decides not to start more trouble with this guy and grabs Blair's hand to get out of there. The class rep sees her holding our guy's hand and visibly gets pissed about the scene. He chases after them and confronts Blair, saying all he knows how to do is hide behind girls. In response, Blair cracks a little joke and asks, "What's the real meaning of the painting?" For some reason, the question leaves Isabella confused, and she just stares at him, not getting it. Blair then explains that if he understands the story behind the painting, he can create a new magic method. The blonde guy hears this and mocks him, saying Professor Brittany only put his name on the work out of pity and nothing more. Isabella defends him again, saying Blair figured out how to solve the riddle on his own. In response, the blonde guy decides to make a scene. He loudly announces for everyone to hear that Blair is going to solve the riddle written in the painting. Isabella is shocked by his attitude, realizing the dude just turned a personal problem into a public event. Immediately, rumors start spreading down the hall, with everyone talking trash about Blair. All the commotion catches the attention of Professor Brittany and Calvin, who were farther away. The blonde then taunts our main guy, saying he's now forced to solve the riddle in front of everyone. Suddenly, a hand grabs our guy's arm. It's Professor Brittany. She looks worried and asks why he went and fought with Face. She explains that the Howard family is super powerful in town, and messing with them means trouble. If he keeps this up, he'll have problems not just with the Math Society but with the whole academy. And to make things worse, this Seven Bridges problem is something mathematicians have been trying to crack for centuries. Face just wants him to try and solve it so he can humiliate our guy in front of everyone. Then Face, the blonde kid, overhears the conversation and turns to Professor Brittany. He mocks her, saying she called Blair a genius herself, but now it looks like she doesn't trust him anymore. The professor gets nervous and starts raising her voice to explain, but she's cut off. That's when Blair, full of confidence, says he actually accepts the challenge. He says it's a way to thank the family head for kicking him out of the library. The nearby girls overhear this and are surprised because they had no clue why he really left the library. They even ask if he's sure, but Blair is already turning toward Face. He confirms he'll solve the problem and accepts the bet. Then Face starts explaining the story behind the so-called Seven Bridges Challenge. It was a guy from the first generation of the Howard family who came up with it. Many years ago, the family head was an important official and noticed the capital had a unique geography. Back then, the city was way smaller. It was split by a river with 2 islands in the middle. To connect everything, they built 7 bridges. These bridges helped the townspeople connect and do business. One day, this old family head was looking at the bridges and had a crazy idea. Was it possible to cross all 7 bridges passing over each only once and return exactly to the spot where you started? When he posed this question, mathematicians across the kingdom went nuts trying to find the answer. A bunch of famous scientists traveled to the capital just to try solving the problem. Time passed, people came up with tons of theories, but no one could figure out how to get back to the starting point without crossing a bridge twice until one day the old man who created the challenge announced he found the solution. He told everyone to meet him the next day to prove he was right. So mathematicians from everywhere gathered at the bridges, but they waited all day and the man never showed up. A few days later, they found his body. The story goes that he got so excited about his discovery he ended up tripping and drowning in the river. His death was a huge blow to everyone in the math world. The problem was never solved, and not even his own family knows the answer. Even with the solution lost, the family hung an engraving of the bridges in their hall to honor the man. Face finishes by saying this whole story is a source of pride for them. Our guy instantly gets what this is all about because this puzzle is super similar to one from his own world. After telling the whole story, Face asks with a mocking smile if Blair thinks he can find the solution. Blair replies no, that he won't find a solution, and then adds that if he can't, then no one else can either. Face almost bursts out laughing at that answer. He can barely hold it in and lets out a scornful laugh. He just can't stop and starts laughing loudly in the blonde guy's face. The crowd gets a bit confused and starts to disperse, finding their little spat pretty boring. One of the girls there comments that Blair is just another arrogant brat who doesn't know his place, but her friend, who's right beside her, keeps an eye on our guy and notices a sharp look in his eyes. To her, the black-haired kid isn't as dumb as everyone thinks. After his laughter attack, the protagonist starts explaining his answer. He says the 7 bridges riddle simply has no solution, and that's why he can't solve it. With that answer, everyone in the room falls silent, processing the info. Brittany and Isabella start whispering about what he said. Face gets pissed and curses our guy, asking how the first elder of his clan could have found a solution if none exists. In response, he's hit with another question. Is there any proof that this supposed elder actually solved the riddle? The blonde guy is stunned by his boldness and asks if he has any idea who that elder was in the kingdom. Suddenly, someone in the middle of the crowd slams a cane on the ground and tells everyone to shut up. The guy is Viscount Howard, who tells Figgy to stop bragging about his family. The blonde kid instantly shrinks back and apologizes to his dad. Then, the Viscount approaches Blair and says he's heard about him. Our dude, showing zero emotion, politely bows and greets the family head. The Viscount then says he saw the argument with his son and even apologizes for the kid, but quickly goes on to say he heard Blair claim the puzzle had no solution, and that was a slap in the face to his family's ancestors' honor. The protagonist starts explaining that the 7 bridges of the capital really don't have a solution. The girl nearby notices he's never seemed so confident. The Viscount gets nervous and, now irritated, asks if he really wants to prove what he's saying. Our main guy doesn't back down and says he can prove to everyone the puzzle is impossible. According to him, many scholars back then tried solving it by practically testing the paths, which is a legit attempt. But if you really look at the problem, the answer is something totally different. While talking, he's drawing on paper and then decides to show it to everyone. He explains that a practical and complicated problem like this can be turned into a simple drawing, where each land area is a point and each bridge is a line connecting those points. So, the map of the 7 bridges can be simplified into that drawing. If you can leave each point without repeating a path, it means you can get back to where you started. The crowd is stunned and some people comment they never thought of solving the problem that way. In response, one of the 2 girls who were talking about Blair admits it's not so simple after all and that her friend was right. The other girl gives her a told you so look, totally satisfied she was right. The protagonist keeps explaining. He says that, aside from the start and end points, every time you cross a bridge to get somewhere, you meet another bridge to leave. So he simplifies the math. Points with an odd number of connecting lines are odd points, and points with an even number of lines are even points. Brittany gets the logic. To leave the starting point and come back, you have to pass through every point, and to do that, all points have to be paired. Our guy confirms her idea and says that's the key. Just then, a guy with glasses gets what Blair's saying and starts asking a question out loud. but Blair cuts him off immediately. He explains that the 4 points in that puzzle are singular or, in other words, odd. So no matter what method they use, they'll never be able to return to the starting point. He drops the bomb. The 7 bridges puzzle has no solution and never did. The whole crowd is shocked, processing what he just said. The guy with glasses admits there's no flaw in the theory, which means the problem really is impossible. The blonde kid, totally embarrassed by the revelation, yells that Blair is wrong. Then everyone starts realizing the Howard family has been lying the whole time. He tells everyone to shut up and insists he's wrong, but after such clear proof, no one doubts anymore that the puzzle has no solution. The other girl who trusted Blair's smarts from the start says their ancestor was just a scammer, unable to handle the crowd's pressure. Blonde Fi panics and starts calling for his dad, but instead of support, he gets a huge punch in the face. His dad, Viscount Howard, hits his son with all his might, sending him flying several meters back. The family head starts blaming Fi for not keeping his mouth shut. He says if it weren't for him, the Howard family wouldn't have been humiliated in front of so many people, and vows the guy who dared dishonor his family will pay. The Viscount tries to sneak away out of everyone's sight, but suddenly hears a voice telling him to stop. It's Blair. He says that, according to the rules of the Math Society, since he helped Feige with the question, the Viscount now has to help him in return. The Viscount stops, thinks for a moment, and ends up agreeing. He asks what question Blair wants answered. Our guy's question is pretty simple. If the sides of a square are 1, what's the value of the diagonal? The family head looks totally stunned, not knowing what to think. Brittany steps in and asks if Blair knows it was the Howard family who created the Howard theorem. According to their theory, if the sides of a square equal 1, then the square of the diagonal's length equals 2. That's right. But Blair points out that's not what he asked. His question was about the value of the diagonal itself, not the value the Viscount gave. The family head goes pale at this detail and starts to panic. The crowd listening also starts wondering what the heck the diagonal's value is. Everyone's waiting for the Viscount to explain. After thinking for a long time, the man starts sweating and gets nervous because he simply doesn't know the answer. Our protagonist then realizes that, just as he suspected, the Viscount knew about this number's existence all along. In Blair's old world, scientists were respected, but no one really cared. In this world, though, science isn't that advanced. Scientists are treated like celebrities. People who make big discoveries become famous worldwide and earn respect even from royalty and nobles. So, the scientists banded together, gained economic and political power, and became a massive force. The Howard family is like the bosses of the math community. Whatever they say goes. And in this math society, there are all kinds of people, scientists, politicians, even church folks. They believe everything in the world can be explained with numbers. Basically, their whole idea is pretty much like the Pythagorean school, founded by a super famous scientist from ancient Greece. The Pythagorean school had tons of followers, but they had a flaw that made everything collapse. The problem was they thought everything could be represented by whole numbers or fractions. They believed those numbers could explain anything in the universe. But then, one of Pythagoras' students, a dude named Hippasus, found a huge flaw in that way of thinking. He proved it was impossible to calculate the diagonal of a square using only fractions. This discovery shattered the very foundation of everything they believed in. The group freaked out so much that instead of fixing the problem, they decided to get rid of the guy who found it. They grabbed poor Hippasus, tied a rock to him, and threw him into the sea, but it was useless because the truth always comes out. More and more people started talking about Hippasus' problem, and eventually, the Pythagorean school ended. These numbers that couldn't be written as fractions were called irrational numbers, and from there, knowledge about numbers just exploded, creating a whole new field in math. Judging by the Viscount's face, Blair realizes he's known about irrational numbers for a long time, and our guy gets curious about how this world dealt with all that. The question puts the Viscount in a tight spot, and he starts sweating bullets. The audience got super curious, and people started trying to calculate that diagonal right then and there. Aitne's intrigued too and asks, what's the deal with this number, since it can't be expressed? Our protagonist explains it's a totally new type of number and that there are many others like it. He says someone had already found a number like that before, but the discovery was silenced because of Fiji. At that moment, the Viscount realizes the mess he's in, and it's all his own son's fault. He glares at the kid with a death stare, but the blonde wasn't in the mood to get another beating, so he desperately looks for a way out. Fiji then decides it's all Blair's fault for dishonoring the Howard family. With hatred in his eyes, he lunges at our guy to beat him up. The blonde charges forward, blind with rage, fists ready to throw down. Blair, seeing the trouble coming, prepares to defend himself, but suddenly, just as Fiji's fist is in the air, a hand shoots out and grabs his wrist hard, stopping the attack. The one who stopped the blonde was that girl who had been watching Blair. Fiji looks at the girl, Alice, totally confused, and yells at her to let go. The girl, unfazed by the blonde's panic attack, politely apologizes and says she has to stop him. Fiji tries to break free, but it's useless because for some reason, this girl is insanely strong. Suddenly, he hears his father's voice calling him, and the kid freezes in fear. The Viscount is not happy at all with his son's behavior that stained the family name, expecting a serious scolding. The blonde tries to explain himself, but his mind goes completely blank. Then, the head of the house raises his voice, getting ready to say something to everyone present. He apologizes to the crowd for the trouble his son caused, saying it's all his fault. And about the number Blair mentioned, he tells everyone not to worry because their math community will find a way to explain it. He politely thanks Blair and says he has to leave, but all that politeness was just an act, and he throws a mocking look wishing our guy good night on his property. Blair, savoring his little victory, wishes the Viscount the best too. As he went to handle his business, the Viscount thought he never imagined going through such an embarrassment. Our protagonist then sincerely thanks the woman who defended him from the blonde. She's surprised he forgot his own lover and asks how he could be so forgetful. Suddenly, Isabella smacks the back of Blair's head with all her strength, catching him completely off guard. Annoyed, she asks why he was flirting with other women. This little playful quarrel makes Alice burst out laughing. She apologizes for interrupting the couple's flirting. Both, surprised, look at the woman, who says it was just a joke but admits she's a bit jealous of their relationship. Isabella gets really nervous about the comment and says the woman is wrong. The blonde then asks, "What's Alice, the girl Alice, doing here?" Alice explains she always attends these events, but he didn't expect to see the mayor's daughter there. Then, Brittany steps in and explains that Alicia's family is well known in the city's math community, and she's been attending these seminars representing her family for years. She introduces herself to our guy, saying her name and extending her hand. The girl says she's a junior at the academy and a classmate of Isabella. Blair shakes her hand and says the pleasure is all his. Alicia then leans in close and looks at him with a curious expression. Being so close, our guy can't help but end up staring at her chest, blushing like crazy. While Alicia looks at the protagonist, Isabella feels down, realizing she can't compare to the other girl's beauty. The mayor's daughter's classmate says she liked Blair's presentation and suggests he start taking math more seriously, but suddenly Blair shuts her down, saying he'll have to pass. He suggests she go see Professor Brittany since he learned a lot from her. Alicia immediately realizes he's not falling for cheap tricks and is impressed by his boldness. Alex says goodbye to the group and tells Blair he wants to talk to him alone later. This makes Isabella a little jealous. She was curious about his reaction when she asked if he wanted to go with Alicia, but Blair just looked at her totally confused, asking why he should go with the other girl. In Isabella's mind, all guys are the same. They see a pretty girl and immediately start chasing after her. Not wanting to drag the conversation out, Blair blurts out that Alicia can't even compare to Isabella's beauty. This makes her nervous and she asks if he's serious. Our guy, with a completely serious expression, says yes. He really thinks she's more beautiful. The protagonist feels relieved to have dodged that bullet, while Isabella gets shy thinking about the compliment. Suddenly, a guy in a white suit approaches them. It's President Calvin and the group asks what he's doing there. The president says they're the stars of the night and he just had to come say hi. Not realizing the magnitude of what he'd done, Blair humbly says he just helped solve the problem and mentioned that number. But Calvin explains that the problem and that number were no small deal. The Howard family was very proud of that 7 bridges puzzle, except today it was proven the problem has no solution. Because of that, the family's reputation went down the drain and the number Blair mentioned could change the entire world of mathematics. So, the president wants to know who this guy really is. He's curious where such talent came from out of nowhere and what the real intentions are of the guy who shook everything up with a simple explanation. Blair decides to play dumb. He says everyone saw Fisi asking for help. He just had an idea and said it out loud. As for the number, it was just curiosity. He even adds that the Viscount would have surely found that number eventually with the Math Society's help. Calvin decides not to push it and admits maybe he overthought it, but warns Blair to watch out for the Howard family because fighting them isn't a good idea. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the Howard family father is in his office with his son, who's lying on the floor. The boy got a brutal beating for embarrassing the family and his face is covered in marks. Next to the big boss is a shadowy figure advising that it's time to act. The Viscount is waiting for Blair to leave the mansion so he can take care of him and make it look like an accident. The shadowy figure hears the order and bows in obedience. Suddenly, the Viscount hears a voice behind him saying he's going to kill someone again. When he turns around, he sees a white-haired man wearing the same kind of white suit. The father turns his head with a nasty look on his face. He didn't like the tone of the man named Abel one bit, and the figure dressed in black is shocked because she herself had killed that man with her own hands. The man says it's normal they're surprised since the Viscount himself ordered him killed last time. In disbelief, the father jumps up from his chair and shouts, asking how he's not dead and if this Blair guy works for him. Wanting to end this here and now, the old man pulls a gun out of nowhere, points it at Abel, and tells him to start talking now. At that moment, his blonde brother finally realizes what's going on and takes in the whole scene. Abel, dressed in a white suit, says his father is asking too many questions and he doesn't even know where to start the story. But after thinking a bit, he agrees to tell part of it. He says Blair has nothing to do with him, but that he, Abel, had a very good reason to come back. Cool as a cucumber, even with a gun pointed right at him, he announces he's going to change the Howard family completely. The head of the family looks at the guy totally confused and asks how he plans to do that. Instead of an answer, he just gets another question back. Abel wants to know what, in his father's opinion, is the foundation of their family. The Viscount, without wasting time, answers that their foundation is their reputation, but Abel immediately dismisses that. He claims that his family was actually built on lies. The man starts getting angry and demands to know what he means by that. Abel then drops a truth bomb. His father always knew that the Seven Bridges problem had no solution, but to protect the family's glory and their name in the math society, he chose to hide the truth. For years, whenever someone got close to discovering it, his father found a way to get rid of them. That even included him. Not even his own son was an exception to the old man. The Viscount tells the boy to shut up, tired of hearing truths he didn't want to face. He's ready to kill his son again, using the excuse that he's doing it for the family's sake. But Abel isn't scared and says it's already too late because the truth can't be hidden forever. And starting today, that guy named Blair has already exposed everything to every mathematician in the entire city. His dad might take care of some of them, but he won't be able to wipe out all the witnesses. Out of nowhere, our white-haired dude grabs the gun's barrel and pulls it against his own shoulder. He says if he doesn't kill every witness by tomorrow, the whole state will know the truth. Abel then asks if his father really thinks he can keep the family together when everything falls apart. With nothing left to say, the Viscount drops the gun and Abel picks it up. His dad, completely defeated, asks what he's supposed to do, and his son suggests he become the new head and change the family. It's the only way the Howard name will keep existing. According to him, his father knows perfectly well that no one but him can save the family. The Viscount, feeling the pressure rising, starts desperately considering the proposal, and those words finally reach him. Several days pass. Then our guy wakes up at Brittany's place. He's really enjoying the room, mostly because it has a real bed and doesn't smell like that awful closet where he used to sleep. He decides to go say good morning, but suddenly stops dead with his jaw dropped. In Brittany's room, he sees a huge pile of papers full of scribbles. Immediately, our protagonist realizes everything. She probably spent the whole night searching for that number he mentioned at the dance. After the seminar, the news about the theory of the so-called unsolvable problem spread all over the country. With that, the Howard family's reputation started going downhill. And that mysterious number no one could find even got a nickname, the number of doom. Basically, all the mathematicians in the country were trying to solve this mystery, but no matter how hard they racked their brains, nothing worked. The truth is, in this world, math is still pretty basic. They haven't reached the level to explain things in physics. In fact, physics hasn't even been discovered yet. Still, scientists are highly respected there and always work late. Our guy is sure that sooner or later they'll find the answer. They might mess up a lot along the way, but in the end, the truth will come out. While Brittany keeps sleeping, our protagonist grabs the newspaper to read. He finds out the Howard family has a new leader. People say this new guy will probably shut down the math society. For the Howard family, that would be the best thing they could do, but Blair wonders why they'd take such a drastic step. He tries to find out who this new leader is, and that's when Brittany appears behind him. All sleepy, she wishes him a good day. The black-haired guy gets a bit nervous seeing her. She looks so innocent that he feels shy. He just stands there admiring her beauty while the blonde simply looks at him silently. But then her expression changes. She gets annoyed remembering she asked him to wake her up as soon as he got up. Brittany pokes his cheek with her finger and calls him a naughty boy. Then she starts teasing him about that number Blair won't reveal. The problem is she's too close to him. So close that our guy gets super embarrassed and suddenly his nose starts bleeding. While he stands there red as a tomato, Brittany finally notices what he's wearing. Then it clicks and she understands why he reacted that way. Super embarrassed, she lets out a scream that echoes through the whole house, calling Blair a pervert. After all that chaos, we see our guy in the kitchen trying to make something, and on his face is the perfect handprint mark. The girl apologizes, saying she hit him by accident, fully aware that when Brittany wakes up she acts like a completely different person. The blonde worries, thinking he won't like her that way anymore, but our guy casually says he likes her no matter what. She's surprised to hear that and looks at him. The answer seems to please her, and you can tell she blushed, while Blair looks pretty satisfied with himself. Then the girl gets curious and asks why he's mixing eggs and red fences. He explains he's making a tomato omelet, and the blonde finds that pretty weird. Blair says that in his hometown they call those red fences tomatoes, and almost everyone there knows how to make a tomato omelet. He remembers his past life and how he used to eat this all the time. After cooking, he quickly gets ready and heads to school, but not before asking the girl to try his food. Suddenly, Brittany stops him to give him something. She presses a white cloth against his chest and wipes his hoodie. Our guy is dying of embarrassment from Brittany's unexpected move. At least his clothes look a bit cleaner now. She tells him to go, and Blair, still feeling a little awkward about what just happened, says goodbye. The girl stays home alone and decides to try the food, which still seems pretty weird to her. She takes a small bite with her spoon and slowly puts it in her mouth. The taste of the omelet completely surprises her. Brittany has never tasted anything like it before. It's so good it gives her goosebumps. She savors the sweet flavor of the tomatoes. The food is insanely delicious, and she's totally amazed. Meanwhile, our guy has already arrived at the academy and suddenly realizes his stomach is growling like crazy. While he was busy cooking for Brittany, he totally forgot about himself and ended up leaving without eating. In Blair's class, the girls are gossiping about the new head of the Howard family, who shut down the math society. They're talking about how handsome this mysterious guy is, how he solved the family's biggest mystery and then just disappeared. One of the girls even says her uncle from the math society told her the guy was about her age. The only thing is the guy himself asked for his name to be kept secret. The girl can't wrap her head around how a guy his age could blow the whole world away with that number. Blair is half listening to the conversation when he sees Isabella standing right next to him, asking for the guy's number. But our protagonist keeps denying he knows anything. The blonde doesn't buy it and calls him out to his face. Suddenly, another third-year student walks into the room and tells Isabella to leave Blair alone. It's Alice, who cheerfully greets Blair. He returns the greeting while Isabella just looks at her with disdain. The guys in Blair's class watch the scene shocked, totally jealous of him. One of the guys is just standing there trying to figure out why Blair is so popular with the girls. Right then, Alice approaches our protagonist and asks if they were talking about the guy's number. But instead of an answer, all they hear is a loud growl coming from our guy's stomach. Both look at him confused, and Blair is absolutely mortified by the situation. He apologizes to them, but Alice finds it all so weird she just bursts out laughing. Isabella immediately calls him a pig, complaining it's not even lunchtime yet. Suddenly, a small bun wrapped in a napkin is placed right in front of his face. It was offered by Alice, who said she accidentally grabbed an extra one and was asking for help to eat it. Blair looks at the roll practically drooling. He sincerely thanks the girl and tells her she's a really good person, but Isabella pinches his cheek and yells at him not to accept food from strangers. He tries to explain he wanted to refuse, but the bun smelled too good. The blonde looks super annoyed and asks why he didn't ask her for some bread. Then Blair reminds her she was the one who called him a pig, so he didn't ask for anything. Alice explains it's natural, she wants to help because Blair is a genius. Isabella turns green with envy at the comment and, a bit embarrassed, also offers her food to our protagonist, telling him to forget Alice's role. Alice, in turn, mocks the blonde, saying she can't decide for him since they're not dating or anything. Isabella's patience runs out and she shoots the other girl a killer glare. The blonde then gives Blair a choice, either her sandwich or Alice's role. He could only pick one. The fight between the two just heats up, and our guy just wants to eat in peace. He asks Isabella to pass him the sandwich, thanking her. The blonde even does a little victory dance thinking he chose her dish, but then out of nowhere, he grabs the bun with one hand and the sandwich with the other and shoves them both in his mouth at the same time. To everyone's surprise, he feels his cheeks trying to swallow, forces his throat, and manages to swallow both. With tears in his eyes, he says it was delicious and thanks them both. The whole crowd stares at him with their mouths open in complete disbelief. Isabella still boasts that her sandwich was so good. Blair just devoured it in an instant. Then Alice notices a little crumb from the bun stuck on his face and decides to wipe it off with her finger. She says with a more teasing look that there's still something on his cheek and that she'll eat it herself. The girl licks the crumb right off her finger and calls Blair a messy eater. Continuing her teasing, Alice eats the piece, and Isabella reacts horribly to it. Suddenly, the bell rings throughout the building, signaling class is about to start. Alice says goodbye to Blair, telling him to study hard. The blonde, with an angry look, then tells him to wait for her in the classroom after class ends. The third-year girls leave the room, slamming the door shut. Blair finally breathes a sigh of relief. For him, all this change was already pretty stressful. Out of nowhere, someone pinches his cheek again and calls his name. It was Toby, who immediately asks where he had found Alice. Blair replies that he met her a few nights ago, and Toby has a really weird reaction. Our guy explains that Professor Brittany had taken him to a math seminar, and that's where they met. Then Toby realizes it was at that same seminar where everyone started talking about the so-called number. But his curiosity has to wait because the teacher arrives in the classroom and calls Blair to the board. Brittany asks the class to split into groups to try to solve the problem. While no one's looking, the teacher gives Blair a little nudge and says his name. She discreetly hands him a small bun, and our protagonist's reaction is kinda strange. The teacher whispers that she noticed he hadn't eaten breakfast and brought him something to eat, but Blair, who was already full, looks at the bun with pure desperation. He goes back to his desk, where everyone has already split into groups. Toby sees the bun in Blair's hand and asks where he got it. Bly, not wanting to get into details, says he'll tell him later and that right now they need to solve the problem. Suddenly, the pink-haired girl jumps in and asks Blair about the guy at the math seminar who was trying to act dumb. Our guy says he thinks he saw that dude there. The girl doesn't fully get his answer but gives Blair a look like she knows he's hiding something. He makes up an excuse, saying that when the mysterious guy showed up, he had stepped out for a second to take care of something, and by the time he came back, the guy had already talked about the number. Toby joins the conversation, and both can't believe how Blair missed it. Our guy explains he ate too much and was having stomach problems. His friend, a bit suspicious, says Blair really blew his chance, but the pink-haired girl defends our protagonist, saying just going to an event like that is pretty lucky. She remembers he's really good at math and asks him to make time to study with her. Toby mocks the girl, saying her study request had other intentions. The other girl sitting with him in the group starts getting really annoyed with the conversation. Some time passes, and finally, the bell rings, signaling class is over. The protagonist is exhausted because he spent the whole time trying to avoid Isabella without being seen. He just wants some peace and quiet to finally practice magic, since he needs to keep his skills sharp. Out of nowhere, not far away, he hears a voice asking since when he's been interested in magic. He looks and only sees a dark silhouette in front of him, unable to make out who it is. Suddenly, a cold blade presses against his throat, and our guy is terrified. Blair looks at the person threatening him, full of fear, but can't see their face at all. The dark figure is actually a blue-haired girl. She's the protagonist's classmate who tells him not to move, warning that the dagger is very sharp. He immediately recognizes her as his friend Molly and is confused about why she's doing this. She says he was the one who solved the riddle at the seminar and talked about the number. According to her, the Blair she knew never had this kind of talent and demands to know why he's impersonating her friend. Our guy, showing no fear, responds that he is Blair and decides to keep the body swap story to himself for now. Molly pulls the dagger away from his neck and starts pinching and pulling his cheeks, convinced he's wearing a mask. She pulls hard, annoyed, trying to rip off any disguise he might have, but then suddenly realizes it's not a mask, it's his real skin, and it makes no sense to force it. Tired of her whole intimidation routine, Blair kicks her in the leg, making her lose balance. Unable to stay standing, she falls backward, but our protagonist is quick and manages to grab her arms, stopping her fall before she can hurt herself. All flustered, Molly yells at him to let her go. He says he will, but only on the condition that she never points a knife at his throat again. He stares at her waiting for an answer, and the girl looks back terrified. The guy tells her she's already seen for herself that he's not wearing a mask. He is the real Blair. Molly can't handle the pressure and, with a face red as a tomato, begs him again to let her go. Then she asks where he got those new skills and why his way of speaking has changed so much. Our protagonist decides to tell her a half-truth. He says he's Blair, but at the same time, he's not because one day he just woke up like this. He explains he comes from a world without magic, but where science is insanely advanced. People there don't even know how to use magic. For them, it's just fiction. In that world, science is so advanced it even surpasses magic. People can do things that even magicians here couldn't pull off. With all that technology, they've already explored the universe and even traveled to other planets. He tells her that in this other world, he was just a math teacher, so he has knowledge no one here could even imagine exists. Molly is amazed, asking if it's true you can cross the skies and if other planets really exist. The guy confirms that yes, they do. That's right. He keeps saying there are countless other planets out there in space, and at the end of the day, he woke up in this world as a math genius and a great magician. But unfortunately, he lost part of his memories. The girl just stands there processing everything he said, trying to decide what to do. Suddenly, she lets out a sigh of relief and seems to have made up her mind. Molly smiles and says she believes him because the Blair she knew always loved telling all kinds of fantastic stories. Confused, he asks what she's talking about. She replies that he always liked science more than magic and kept saying he wanted to live in a world without powers, probably because he always had trouble with them. The girl says he must have been crying that day over his memory loss and promises she'll help him get it back. Playing along, our guy takes Molly's hand and thanks her for caring. She gets all shy while Blair gently holds her hand, but, totally killing the vibe, she pulls away and tells him not to get the wrong idea, that she only agreed to help with his memory and nothing else. Some time passes at the academy. They solve their problems, and each goes their own way. Blair stays there in the hallway thinking about his life and the things he's done. He starts to get a little worried because this was the first time he told anyone about all this world-hopping stuff. Out of nowhere, he feels someone behind him and a huge hand grabs his body. When he looks, it's Toby lifting our guy into the air effortlessly, holding him with both hands. A little argument starts between them while Phage watches from a distance. When they finally notice the blonde there, Blair is already trying to calm his friend down. Then, Toby approaches Phage, demanding to know what he's doing there. But to everyone's surprise, Feige bows before them. He starts apologizing to Blair, saying he treated him really badly. Fake Howard insists the apology is sincere and apologizes again. Blair, who wasn't expecting this at all from the arrogant blonde, just stands there staring, totally shocked. The atmosphere gets weird and the crowd around them starts noticing their boss's strange behavior. But instead of saying anything, our protagonist just looks at Feige with a what-the-hell expression on his face. The crowd that had gathered had no clue what was going on. Why the hell would Feige Howard be apologizing to Blair? Out of nowhere, Feige pulls out a fancy-looking paper and hands it to our guy. It was an invitation from his older brother Faze, who is now the new head of the Howard family. Turns out there was a conference that night with all the mathematicians in the kingdom. Feige wanted to discuss the Howard family's reputation. Feige, looking like he was forced into this, asks Blair to please attend. Toby, sensing a trap, warns Blair this might be a setup. Our protagonist stands there thinking, deciding whether to go to this conference or not. Time passes and night falls. The sun has set, and the Howard mansion starts filling up with important and scholarly people. And, of course, Blair couldn't resist his curiosity and showed up too to see what this conference was all about. Suddenly, someone tugs his ear and he thinks this scene looks terribly familiar. It was Isabella, super pissed because Blair had stood her up earlier, and right behind them appears Professor Brittany, who was also there. She greets both of them and says she was looking for him at the academy too. The protagonist is surprised to hear the professor was called to the conference. According to her, news of the event had spread all over the kingdom. Basically, almost every mathematician in the city was there. Some even came from far away. But here's the surprising part. No one else got a formal invitation. Apparently, Blair was the only one who received an official invite to the so-called conference. Suddenly, someone touches Blair's ear again and he blushes completely. It's Alice asking what's up with his ear. Then, the whole group surrounds our protagonist and starts talking loudly. It's total chaos. Our guy already knows where this is headed. The two girls are going to spend the whole night arguing. Before things could get worse, Brittany tells everyone to head inside the mansion, and there goes Blair. Surrounded by the girls, slowly climbing the stairs toward the hallway leading to the main hall. Inside, something immediately catches his attention and he can't stop staring. Turns out the famous painting of the 7 bridges of the capital is no longer on the wall. Brittany, standing next to him, is curious to see how the new head of the family, some guy named Abel, is going to handle this mess. Blair notices she's talking about this Abel like she knows him, so he asks if that's the case. She confirms they were in the same class. Brittany explains Abel wanted to be a professor at the academy but disappeared about 3 years ago. She was shocked when she found out he suddenly became the new head of the Howard family. Then Blair, feeling curious, asks, "What's this Abel guy like?" The question catches Brittany off guard and she gets a bit speechless talking about her old classmate. After thinking for a moment, she sums it up, saying he was a guy who lived and breathed math. Meanwhile, as the crowd gathers in the main hall, Abel is in his office going through some documents. Faze, his brother, walks in and tells him that everyone has gathered and they're just waiting for the new boss. But Abel responds with a totally random question about love, saying that the wait just makes the meeting more exciting. Then he asks if Blair showed up at the conference. The blonde guy replies that there's a huge crowd outside and it's impossible to tell if Blair came. But he did what he could. Abel notices his brother is tense and tries to calm him down by telling him to chill, that he's not their dad and there's no need to be scared. Finally, he tells his brother it's time to go meet everyone, saying this is the start of a new era for the Howard family. Back in the hall, the crowd has been waiting a while and had even started to relax a bit. Bader is also in the middle of the crowd, when suddenly he sees the back doors slam open and Abel and his brother walk out. The scar-faced guy struts down the red carpet with mad confidence. Some people in the hall are a bit shocked to see how young the new leader is. He walks to a spot where everyone can see him, waves to the crowd, and thanks them for coming. He introduces himself as Abel Howard, the new head of the family. Brittany looks at him and realizes the guy has completely changed. He's not the same kid from 3 years ago. The way he dresses, the way he talks, everything's different. Turning to the crowd, he says he knows everyone's eager to get to the main event, but first he pulls out a book and asks permission to tell a story about the family's past. Our boy Blair stares at the book, super curious, trying to figure out what it is. Abel then explains it's the diary of the clan's very first ancestor. He says this book holds the whole truth the family has been hiding for centuries. The story goes that, like many other scientists, his ancestor went to the 7 bridges to solve that famous problem. He spent a long time there working on it, but couldn't find the answer. Still, the old man had no intention of giving up, and then one day, the ancestor finally thought he'd found the right path. He got so hyped he ran out to tell everyone. The next day, he showed the path he supposedly discovered. The old man was so happy he didn't even stop to check if his theory was right. He just kept spreading the news, but later that night he decided to actually test it, and that's when he realized the huge mistake he'd made. He hadn't found the right solution at all. In fact, he'd just taken the wrong shortcut in his research. The man realized the massive error he'd made and that the next morning he'd be totally humiliated in front of a lot of people. In the end, unable to bear the shame, the old man decided to throw himself into the river. He wanted to pay for his guilt with his own life. He left behind a notebook explaining everything that happened and in his notes asked his descendants to tell everyone the truth, but he never imagined his family wouldn't do what he asked. Instead, they hid the book and made up a story claiming the ancestor had solved the problem, but the proof sank with him. All that just to protect the family's honor, and that lie stayed alive until now. But you can't hide the truth forever, and now the family has to face the consequences. After that heavy speech, Abel made a deep bow in front of everyone at the conference. He said he wanted to apologize to everyone for hiding the truth for so many years. Then a group of people in the audience started yelling at him, asking how his family had the nerve to keep it a secret for so long. Watching Abel, Blair realized the guy was pretty determined. Once it was clear the Seven Bridges problem had no solution, it was obvious the Howard family had been lying the whole time. Now that he'd told the truth, future generations would have an even bigger responsibility. And for their first ancestor, the name Howard would become a mark of shame. Suddenly, a girl in the crowd asked if that was why Abel dissolved the Math Society. Without looking up, the new family head replied that atonement was one reason, but not the main one. The main reason for dissolving the society was the so-called devil's number. The same girl asked again if they'd managed to find that number. Abel straightened up and said no. They hadn't been able to find the devil's number, but it wasn't because they lacked skill. He claimed this number simply didn't exist, which left Blair pretty shocked. An older man in the audience asked why he thought the number didn't exist. Abel explained that the number didn't exist within the framework of their current knowledge, which was why he dissolved the Math Society. A guy with glasses asked if they'd never be able to discover the devil's number, but the answer was no. The white-haired man claimed the devil's number could be solved and that one day they'd be able to do it. But for now, this is a completely new field of research, and the person who can guide everyone into this new field is none other than Mr. Blair from Shen Academy of Nashe, the guy who invented the devil's number. The crowd started whispering because almost no one there knew RMC. Abel, realizing the situation, said that probably very few people knew Blair because he's a super modest guy, so when he revealed this number, he asked them not to spread his name around. But now, to get past this hurdle and break into this new field, he asked Mr. Blair for help. At that moment, Professor Brittany suddenly turned around to ask our guy what they should do, but then, out of nowhere, she and everyone else realized the dude had just vanished without a trace. Yeah, he just dipped. The blonde kid walks up to his brother and whispers that Burr isn't there. Abel comments he thought his curiosity would get the better of him, but he guessed he was wrong. He says sooner or later the guy will show up and then they can ask him everything face to face. Does some time pass after the conference? The next day, rumors are already flying around the sophomore class. The gossip is that the person who invented this so-called number was Blair. Abel managed to pin all the blame on him. With that, no one cares about the Howard family drama anymore. In our guy's class, he's the only topic anyone's talking about. Out of nowhere, Toby walks up, taps Blair, and calls him by name. But before he can even hear what his friend wants, Blair cuts him off. He says he didn't see anything at the conference, left just in time, and asks to be left alone. But Toby ignores that and tells him to look where he's pointing. The protagonist turns around and finds himself face to face with the person right in front of him. It's the history teacher, a guy named Hank, standing right in front of Blair's desk. The teacher says he knows the kid's a math genius but has never tried his class. Blair tries to defend himself, saying his history knowledge is all jumbled in his head, but the teacher doesn't accept excuses and slams his fist on the desk. He says even if Blair's famous now, he's still a student and needs to take his studies seriously. Toby, eyes wide with fear, decides to interrupt and says someone's looking for Blair. Hank gets pissed at being interrupted and is about to scold the kid, but Toby just points to the side without even looking. The teacher keeps his tough attitude, saying he doesn't give a damn who it is, not even if it's the vice principal. Then, out of nowhere, the vice principal himself puts a hand on his shoulder and says he's here for Blair. The teacher's attitude changes instantly, scared stiff. Hank tells Blair to get up fast and just go with the guy. Our guy gets up immediately and bolts out of the room, walking down the academy hallway. There, next to the vice principal, stands President Calvin. He extends his hand to Blair, who asks, looking a bit down, what they want. The vice principal explains that the whole world is asking him to solve the enigma of the number, and even the city's math society is feeling the pressure. Blair gets the picture and his expression shifts. He's about to speak, but Calvin cuts him off. The president says they really need his help and that it'd be good for him too, but the protagonist, with a small smirk, replies he just doesn't want to do it. The scene switches to Brittany's classroom. She's teaching when the door bursts open. It's Toby, who walks in without knocking. He's totally out of breath. He ran all the way here to tell the teacher to hurry up. He says they took Blair and asked for her help. So the whole crowd gathers around the conference room where they brought our guy. He's surrounded by the top teachers and academy administrators. There are 4 vice principals just to interrogate him and 10 or more managers at the door. Blair asks President Calvin how he expects to get his cooperation. The president answers that since the kid invented this so-called number, he can't just disappoint the entire math community. Then Blair, changing the subject, asks Calvin straight up if he always calls the truth something evil. That answer really pissed some people in the room off. Calvin gets straight to the point and asks if it's true that the number can't be expressed as an integer. The protagonist confirms and says it's not just a number, but you also can't express a square with a number 2 or 3. He explains that this value can't be represented by an integer and that there are many similar numbers. And most importantly, this can be proven mathematically. Calvin, with a surprised look on his face, asks the kid if they've been wrong for hundreds of years. But Blair explains that's normal in math because it's a science where they make and fix mistakes all the time. So Calvin asks if he can help the math community by teaching them the method to prove and formulate a number like that. The protagonist apologizes and says he can't help with that. From his words, you can now understand what's got everyone so scared. They're scared that the truth they believe for centuries might be wrong. According to our guy, fear is the most common human emotion, and there's no shame in it. In his homeland, entire wars were fought just to get to the bottom of the truth. He says they can only move forward and find the truth by overcoming their fear. They need to fight this demon step by step, and if he just tells them everything himself, he'll end up damaging the entire world of mathematics. He believes they can gather the courage to face their fear head-on and beat this challenge. After all, people have always valued bravery. The former president is completely stunned by this statement, feeling the weight of everything happening. Suddenly, everyone around the boy bows deeply and respectfully, thanking him for the lesson. The president agrees with Blair, saying he's right and they were way too hasty. They thank the protagonist for his guidance and promise the math community will never forget his contribution. Afraid of getting even more famous, Blair tries to convince the president to change his mind. Suddenly, the door to the room is ripped off its hinges. Dressed in white, someone flies out with it. The door whistles across the room and some chairs fly behind it. Everyone, including Blair, just stares in shock at the person who slammed the door down with so much force. Everyone sees Brittany standing in the hallway, glaring at the admins with pure rage in her eyes. She unleashes all her power into the air, ready to tear apart anyone who tries to hurt her student. Her face is frozen in an expression of unbelievable fury as she slowly asks the people around why they took her Blair. Our guy, on the other hand, just starts waving and smiling at his teacher, calling her. He says everything's fine and the guys just wanted to talk to him. Realizing what she'd done, Brittany instantly feels mortified and dispels all the magic she had prepared. She apologizes to the president and the others and starts making up some excuses, but the guy doesn't even care. He says it's their fault for going too far and not telling him about their talk with the student. A while later, it's already noon and the whole situation with Blair is finally settled. He and the teacher walk down the hallway in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Breaking the ice, she tries to explain that she was scared those people would hurt him, but the protagonist tells her to chill because with so many students at the academy, no one would dare harm him. Out of nowhere, she says she has a question for him. He, super chill about it, tells her to ask. Then she asks why and how he caused such a fuss about the number. He explains that, like usual in the math community, he just threw a counter question at them, but the girl didn't accept that answer. With a totally embarrassed look on her face, she gets serious and asks if he likes Isabella. The protagonist wasn't expecting that question at all and just froze completely. In Brittany's head, Blair was stuck in a love triangle with Isabella and Fiji. According to her theory, he hated Fiji because she liked him too. So, the teacher promises she won't tell anyone that Blair supposedly humiliated young Howard over Isabella. He tried to explain himself, but it was useless. The teacher didn't even listen and happily ran off down the hall. Trying to fix the mess, our guy yells for her to stop one last time, but his words are totally ignored and he's left in despair, already dreading the headache he's gonna have later. Time passes, now it's night and our protagonist is heading home. Cut to him in the kitchen making dinner for himself and Isabella. He's thinking about how amazing teacher Brittany's imagination is and how he needs to find time to explain everything to her. Suddenly, Isabella appears in front of him, curiously watching what he's cooking. Teacher Brittany also arrives and explains she was the one who called the student so they could investigate the number together. Changing the subject, Bullier asks if it's true that Brittany's main magic is based on wind. She explains she wanted to make a refrigerator to store food, but for that, she needed high-level water magic. The teacher, hearing a new word, asks, "What's a refrigerator?" He hands her a paper and says it's like a fridge to store food. She and Isabella huddle together to look at what the guy drew. Brittany looks surprised at the drawing while her student gives her a little sarcastic smile. Isabella, on the other hand, finds the drawing hilarious and starts laughing nonstop. Our guy, as expected, gets annoyed by her reaction, snatches the paper back and starts complaining. But the teacher takes his drawing seriously and, using a water spell, creates something exactly like what he drew. Our protagonist is shocked and asks how she managed to do that. Then she explains that she's not only mastered air magic at the highest level but also water magic. Isabella is stunned by this, because mages who can master two elements are insanely rare. You can count them on one hand. After seeing this power display, our guy gets curious and asks, why is the teacher still at the academy? The question makes her a bit nervous and she stands there lost in thought. While distracted, her gaze drifts toward the pot of food. To avoid answering, he quickly changes the subject and announces that dinner is ready. It turns out the main guy had prepared a full meal for the three of them and neatly set everything on the table. Isabella is a bit confused since she's never seen that kind of dish in her life. Then the protagonist explains that these are all recipes from his homeland, which is why they're unfamiliar. Isabella even doubts he can cook, but she's dying to try it. A little later, the scene is totally different. The plates are clean with only a few crumbs left. Isabella is savoring and licking her lips after everything she ate. She absolutely loved the food our dude made and even has a dreamy look on her face. The protagonist is surprised by her reaction because Isabella almost never shows what she really feels. He takes the chance to tease her, reminding her that she said she'd rather starve than eat his cooking. Suddenly, the blonde guy turns red with embarrassment, grabs his ear, and starts complaining that the food was way too good. Watching the whole scene unfold, the teacher starts laughing, enjoying the moment. Her laughter catches their attention and both ask, "What's so funny?" That's when the teacher drops that she thinks they make a great couple and are a perfect match. This comment makes both students blush, staring at the teacher, not knowing where to hide. To break the awkwardness, Isabella lets go of the protagonist's ear and says she's not into perverts. The comment doesn't go unnoticed and he replies that he doesn't like arrogant girls like her either. To lighten the mood, the teacher changes the subject. She reminds Isabella that she's moving up to the beginner magic level and asks which element she wants to train. The girl answers that she wants to practice the wind element just like her teacher, but the teacher explains that although wind is powerful, it doesn't help much in combat at lower levels. She says the most important thing for Isabella right now is to learn how to defend herself, and for that, she suggests the earth element. But Isabella doesn't want to hear about it because she thinks earth mage attacks are super ugly. Hearing this, our protagonist thinks sarcastically, "Wow, what a great reason." But then out of nowhere, she grabs his ear again, hard. He jumps and immediately starts yelling at her, asking how she knew what he was thinking. She simply replies that she didn't need to know because it was written all over his face. Then the teacher asks Blair which element he wants to study. Our guy strikes a thoughtful pose with his finger on his chin, and after a moment says that since he was a kid he decided he liked all the elements. Isabella immediately shuts him down, telling him to keep dreaming because in her opinion there's no freaking way he has the talent to master all four elements. But looking at Blair, teacher Brittany notices something different and suddenly even gets goosebumps. She says he not only can, but will achieve the impossible and master all the elements. Isabella thinks that's a big joke, but the teacher explains why. She says when Blair uses magic, a dense and chaotic aura forms around him, so he might have the talent to control all four elements. To change the subject, she says they'll talk about that later and now they're going to start the real magic lesson. The whole group starts cheering. After all, their teacher is a super high-level sorceress, but she warns them that to be great mages they can't rely on magic alone. She explains that even with the gift of magic, casting spells and making gestures takes too much time. To make up for it, mages need to train in martial arts to defend themselves when there's no time to cast anything. While the teacher is giving this whole speech, our guy is more interested in how practical it would be to use water magic to wash the dishes. The teacher emphasizes that often hand-to-hand combat is more useful than magic. That's why before teaching them spells, she wants to show them some martial arts. That's when Blair realizes their teacher is also a fighter. Immediately, Isabella volunteers to fight the guy, saying she's already trained in martial arts at home. Brittany just warns her to be careful not to hurt herself. Isabella promises she won't go all out and immediately provokes Blair by saying that if she's not good at math or magic, at least she'll be better than him when it comes to a fight. Then the two change and head to an empty room to fight. To try to scare him a bit, Isabella tells him he's going to leave this room crying from the beating he's about to get. Saying that, she charges forward to throw the first punch. Her moves are insanely fast. In seconds, she's right in front of our guy and throws a powerful punch straight at his face. Their fight drags on, it's gotten dark outside, and the sky is full of stars. But the fierce battle between Blair and Isabella is still raging inside the house. It turns out Blair was on guard. He sizes her up perfectly and instead of taking the hit, grabs her hand midair. The blonde girl is completely stunned, not knowing what to do. Our guy takes the chance, pulls her, throws her to the ground, and immediately pins her down, twisting her left arm behind her back. Immobilized, the girl starts to dramatize, pretending she's lost and begging him to let her go with a whiny voice. Blair buys it. He relaxes a bit and relieved, tells her he'll let her go. He barely gets a word out before a foot flies straight at his face. The blonde had used fake tears as a trick to break free and counterattack, but he was expecting something like that. Blair makes a quick move, causing the girl to lose her balance and fall again. This time, she can't recover in time and crashes hard. She panics because a fall from that height and speed was gonna hurt like hell. But then, out of nowhere, her fall stops. When she opens her eyes, it's Blair holding her just inches from the ground. He looks at her and apologizes, leaving the girl totally baffled. Brittany is standing there with her mouth wide open. How the hell did this dude manage to beat the mayor's daughter? A girl who's been training since she was a kid. Blair explains he's never taken formal martial arts classes, but where he's from, he was super into that and practiced something called sanda. The teacher says she's never heard of it and that his homeland sounds pretty mysterious. Meanwhile, Isabella, still in his arms, starts pinching our guy's cheek, basically saying, "Put me down already." Not wanting to admit defeat, she blames the floor, saying it was too slippery. After seeing all that, Brittany, the teacher, also gets hyped and calls Blair to train with her. He's a bit hesitant, explaining that with sanda, it's hard to control your strength, and he's scared he might hurt her, but the teacher tells him to chill and not worry about that. So Blair accepts the challenge and faces the teacher with a serious look. He picks up speed and throws a direct kick to Brittany's head. She focuses completely to follow the move and dodge at the last second using all her reflexes, but the attack never lands. Why? Because mid-swing, our guy got totally distracted by the teacher's boobs. He remembered a tip from his old master who said that against a true master, you won't even see what hits you. For a long time, Blair thought that was just a bunch of crap, but now he was learning firsthand that his master was right. With his defense totally open, Brittany knocked him out without even breaking a sweat. She caught the dude midair and gently placed him on the ground. Isabella rushes over, screaming worriedly and asking if he's okay. The teacher explains he just fainted for a second and will wake up any moment. The blonde replies that as far as she's concerned, that pervert could stay knocked out forever. Seeing Blair unconscious and not hearing anything, Brittany takes the chance to drop a bomb. She says she knows Isabella is in love with him. The girl is shocked by what she just heard and starts screaming, blushing like crazy. She tries to deny it, saying the teacher's crazy and she'd never like some weirdo like him, but Brittany insists it's not just a hunch. She's sure about the girl's feelings. Isabella was about to respond, but right then they get interrupted. Still dazed, Blair yells the teacher's name and without even looking grabs the first thing he finds. Isabella gets even more mortified when she sees the guy still unconscious clutching the teacher's chest. Then his eyes start to open. He's coming to, trying to figure out what's going on. The next day, our guy is already at the academy sitting in class rubbing his bruises. Toby looks at him with a mischievous grin and asks, what happened at Brittany's place? Already hinting at something, Blair angrily recalls everything that happened after he passed out. After that scene where he accidentally grabbed the teacher, Isabella totally lost it and went after the pervert. Blair, all bruised, tried to escape, yelling he'd break her arm. The teacher had to step in telling Isabella to let the guy go and explaining he didn't do it on purpose since he was unconscious. Thinking about the student, our protagonist is pissed. The girl has no technique, but she's got absurd strength, enough to break his arm. He never imagined she was so skilled in martial arts. She definitely had a good master and must have trained like crazy. In this world, normal people don't get the chance to learn martial arts from a young age, let alone magic. So Blair thinks she must be from some noble family. Out of nowhere, Toby calls him all excited, saying he's already mastered the spirit summoning technique Blair taught him. Our guy is amazed by his friend's talent, who learned such a complex technique so fast. Toby, super hyped, immediately offers to show what he can do. He focuses, gathers power in his hands, and summons the fire element. The magic starts forming right there, and he shouts the technique's name Fireball, trying to cast the spell. Blair just watches curious and surprised, wondering why nothing happened. Where's the supposed fireball? But Toby tells him to look closer. When both focus on his hands, they see two tiny fireballs floating between his palms. Blair starts mocking his friend, saying at this rate he'll never surpass him in magic. But inside he thinks not even a fireball shows up. It's more like two sparks. Suddenly, something grabs his attention. When he turns around, he finds himself face to face with a hand holding a huge cake in front of him. It was Alice. She had heard that Blair broke his arm and brought him a snack, thinking that, once again, he would show up with nothing to eat. She even comments that Toby probably already devoured his own food. The protagonist replies that he feels a bit weird accepting her food, but at the same time he can't stop staring at the cake. With a smile on his face, the girl asks if it tastes good. As soon as Blair starts eating, he admits that her food is the best of all and asks, "What are you doing here?" She says she has a question for him. Blair promises to be honest and tells her to just spit it out. Then, Alice gets straight to the point. She wants to know if he likes Isabella. The question catches our guy completely off guard. Instead of answering, he asks why she wants to know. But the girl ignores him and insists on getting an answer. Blair, trying to act cool, says that right now the only thing he cares about is magic. She finds his answer pretty weak, but in the end, she seems satisfied. Before the guy has time to recover from that question, Alice leans in and gives him a kiss on the cheek. Blair gets even more nervous and, as she leaves, she tells him she'll come see him more often. At this point, all their classmates who were just watching the scene are surprised at how easy it seems for the girls to be interested in the black-haired guy. Classes finally end and Blair decides to go to the library, still thinking about what Alice meant by all that, but he decides to let it go, remembering he's already read all the magic books on that floor. After finishing the last one, he stretches in his chair and yawns, completely exhausted. So the plan was to head to the second floor, where the more advanced books are kept. He approaches the main desk and sees a girl with purple hair, totally absorbed in a pink-covered book. I guess she's a fan of romance novels, huh? Our guy walks up, says hi, and asks how to get upstairs. The girl glances at his ID card without much interest and sees he's just a student. Then she immediately rejects him, saying that to go to the second floor you need to be at least a beginner-level mage. He explains he still doesn't have enough spiritual power and asks if there's any other way. The girl says no and even mocks him, asking how he could read the advanced books. Anyway, our protagonist gets offended by her pretentious attitude and is about to respond, but suddenly Molly appears at the desk. She recognizes our guy and asks if he needs help. The purple-haired girl doesn't care what's going on, just turns her back and tells Molly to handle it. Then Molly explains that to go upstairs, you need a mage ID, even if it's the most basic one. She says he could try to get a new certification, but chances are slim since his spiritual power is so weak. Still, the guy decides to take the risk. He tells her he just discovered a way to improve water magic. Molly warns him this is serious. If he fails, he'll be banned and never be able to use the library again. But Blair seems totally serious. Molly thinks for a moment and decides not to push, accepting his request. She politely asks him to follow her and points to a nearby room. Molly enters the examiner's room and explains Blair's situation. One of the guys is stunned, saying he can't believe a student wants to improve water magic. The other examiner thinks it's nonsense, just an excuse to trick them, because the water ball technique has existed for centuries and there's nothing to improve on it. The blue-robed mage warns the student to think twice, because if he's bluffing, it's over for him. But Molly stands firm, saying she trusts the guy and asks them to let him take the test. Seeing how insistent she is, the guys don't argue anymore. The blue-robed man agrees and tells our protagonist to come in. Blair enters the rather shabby room and adjusts his mask before speaking. The two mages don't even pay attention, they're just sitting there drinking a red beverage and chatting about life. Our protagonist greets them both, introduces himself as Chen Lo, and says he's a magic student. He explains he's come to show them a way to improve their water ball magic, a method that can seriously boost its power. Hearing this, the examiner, dressed in red, starts looking at the guy. He looks nervous, like his brain just short-circuited. Suddenly, the red guy stands up from his chair and shouts that he recognizes the black-haired guy. He says it was Blair who barged into his office using magic. Turning to the other mage, he says they better head to the testing room because last time the guy almost destroyed the place. The other mage, the one with the mustache, doesn't get this reaction at all and protests, saying he's just a student and doesn't pose any threat. The mustache guy then tells the kid to attack him with a supposed improved water ball technique. Blair then starts gathering all his energy around his body. He channels mana through himself, creating fire and water elements at the same time. Then a huge flame appears in his left hand and in the right. A water ball quickly starts to form. The water mage sees what our guy just did and is stunned, waiting to see what happens next. He immediately starts complaining to his brother because the kid can use two types of magic at once and is already getting ready to cast a spell. Blair, after gathering enough mana in his hands, starts combining the two elements under pressure. The fire and water begin to fuse strongly. Suddenly, when the two spells mix, a wave of water spreads everywhere. The fire mage, who had already raised his shield, instantly realizes that the same thing as before is about to happen again. A pressure explosion blasts through the room, sending everything flying. Thick steam rises and, as it starts to clear, Blair's silhouette appears in the middle of it all. Brushing dust off his clothes, the water mage angrily calls out to the kid. He looks at him furiously and asks, clearly upset, how the black-haired boy managed to do that. For our protagonist, this technique is pretty simple. First, you create a ball of water and then one of fire. Then you just mix the two elements by compressing them with your hands and bringing them together. And when they fuse, they release way more energy than either one alone. The man in the blue robe catches his breath, thinking about how the kid managed to use two elements. He's pleased with the result and asks him to wait there for a moment. Molly decides to attend to her guest and prepares a cup of tea, and he thanks her in return. He feels a bit awkward with the girl just standing next to him and invites her to sit down. To keep the conversation going, the young man asks if Molly is also a mage. She replies that her skills aren't as good as his, impressed by what Blair just did. But our protagonist is humble and says he's not that great either, since he hasn't even reached the beginner level yet, and that the power of the energy balls comes from the technique he uses. He can use 2 elements, but that has nothing to do with his skill. According to him, it's easier than it looks. It's like doing 2 different things at the same time, one with each hand, even showing it by drawing on paper with both hands. Handing the paper to the girl, he shows her that he managed to draw 2 animals at once. The girl says the dog and cat are cute, and our guy replies that they're actually a wolf and a tiger. Looking embarrassed, Molly says she can also do 2 different things at once. Meanwhile, the 2 mages who examined him show up at the vice president's office to report about the student. He doesn't believe a word they say and claims that someone at that guy's level simply couldn't create 2 elements at once. The guy in the blue robes named Brady insists that he and Andre saw everything with their own eyes. A thought crosses the vice president's mind. Maybe this guy could show a new path for magic. But the question is, how many people could really use this kind of magic? If the technique can't be widely used, what's the point? By the vice president's orders, all the managers and staff were gathered in one place. Many of them were pretty annoyed by the sudden order since some were in the middle of their own important business. Out of nowhere, the president appears with 2 mages. They explain that one of them has devised a completely new technique, but there's a small catch. You have to create a sphere of water and a sphere of fire at the same time, simultaneously. The guy Brady says he gathered everyone to see if this technique is something people could use in their daily lives and tells everyone to give it a try. Some of the mages immediately start doubting, wondering if it's even possible to pull off. The purple-haired girl looks at our protagonist and wonders if he's the one who created this magic, but quickly dismisses the idea. After all, he's just a student. Then, all the mages in the room focus and start trying to summon both elements at the same time simultaneously. One of them looks like he's about to succeed. The fire begins to glow and the water starts forming in his hands. But then, out of nowhere, the water goes totally out of control and the spell breaks. No matter how hard he tries, he just can't summon fire and water at the same time. The whole crowd starts saying it's impossible, that no one has ever been able to do it. This guy Brady tells the vice president that no one there could pull off the trick, so he orders them to bring him to our protagonist so he can explain how it works. As they walk toward the cavitation where Blair is, Brady tries to ask the president something but is cut off mid-sentence. The old man says he thinks only Chen Lu can use this magic. He says, sounding a bit discouraged, that maybe no one else in the world can pull it off. It looked like our guy was going to fail the test, but suddenly Molly appears and has managed to do the trick. And there she is with a perfect sphere of water in one hand and a blazing fire sphere in the other. The 3 elder mages instantly fall silent, staring at her with their mouths wide open. Molly notices them and, surprised, greets Vice President Elton. Our protagonist also greets him and takes the chance to say that Molly is super smart and already masters the technique, asking if he passes the test now. The old man explains that, according to the rules, they need at least 3 people who know how to use the new magic. They gathered everyone from the Magic Society and no one, besides Molly, was able to summon both elements. Absolutely no one else. Molly asks, sounding a bit sad, if it's true that he won't pass the test, but the president replies that he has decided to make an exception for Chen Luo because his method could completely change the future of magic in an incredible way. And that's not all. He even invites our protagonist to become an honorary member of the Magic Society. Our guy responds that it's a huge honor, but he has one condition. The president lets him speak and Blair starts to explain it. The condition is that Molly gets promoted to Gangster. Molly is totally shocked and stares at them wide-eyed, not understanding a damn thing. A little later, the purple-haired girl bursts into the secretary's room, furious because Molly got promoted to assistant. She starts seriously hating the blue-haired girl because she thinks the position should have been hers. She demands one of the secretaries tell her where Molly and the student are. Losing her patience, she shoves the other girl hard and calls her an idiot without thinking twice. But then, out of nowhere, she remembers the protagonist had asked about the second floor of the library. Meanwhile, Blair is in the president's office, filling out some important documents. He signs a paper to patent his new revolutionary technique. The old man confirms it. The copyright for the improved water sphere technique is now officially his. Our guy is left speechless, discovering that this world even has copyrights. The president of the Magic Society explains how this is going to work. They'll promote his new technique, and anyone who wants to learn it will have to pay. The money is split 50-50, 50-50. One part goes to the protagonist as the rights holder and the other to the society. And if someone tries to learn it secretly without paying, the society finds out immediately, no exceptions. The offender goes straight to a blacklist and, depending on the case, could even get arrested. Blair thinks to himself how insanely crazy it is that their science is so behind, but their intellectual property protection is super advanced. Seriously impressive. Then, the old man reveals the price of the technique, 100 gold coins. The protagonist almost falls over because that's a real fortune for him, but the president totally misunderstands. He thinks Blair thought it was too cheap and immediately starts explaining that the technique is for highly skilled mages, and if the price is too high, the people who buy it and can't use it will get super pissed at them. The guy says he agrees with the price, but he has a solution for that problem. He suggests adding a special disclaimer clause at the end of the instructions. Basically, the disclaimer would state that the technique requires a high skill level, that people should think twice before buying it, and that there are no refunds whatsoever. He even adds a clause saying the final interpretation of the rules rests with the Magic Society, with himself. The old man asks, what does that mean? And our guy explains it's to free them from any trouble or liability. The president is impressed by how thorough Blair was, thinking of every tiny detail. Blair throws a sarcastic comment saying the old man isn't dumb either and that they think pretty much the same way. A while later, Molly takes the protagonist to the second floor of the library. He's blown away seeing that the place is way bigger than the first floor. She explains that only high-level mages are allowed access there. That's why it's almost always empty. Upstairs, there are tons of books about advanced magic and new techniques that he can study however he wants. No limits. Molly notices his reaction and asks what he's staring at. Our protagonist, being super sweet, tells her he likes her new uniform. It looks really good on her. The girl gets all nervous from the unexpected compliment and thanks him. Right after that, he changes the subject and asks if there's any book about how to increase one's spiritual power. Molly says there are only a few books on that, but she searches a bit and quickly finds exactly what he was looking for, without any problem. The book is called Theory and Practice for Increasing Spiritual Power. But while going down the stairs, Molly trips and just falls down uncontrollably. She closes her eyes tight, bracing for the impact with the floor, but feels absolutely nothing. He opens his eyes to see that the guy caught her in midair and is now holding her in his arms. There's a little moment between them, and Blair asks if she's okay. The girl gets super nervous and, for some reason, feels like she's been in this exact situation before, at some other time. But they weren't alone. And Alice, who just arrived on the second floor, was spying on everything from a corner and, of course, totally misinterprets it, and her mind starts running wild, imagining stuff. Alice assumes Molly seduced the guy to get the promotion, no doubt about it. So she walks up to Blair and starts teasing him, calling him Chen Luo, but he just snaps back rudely, clearly annoyed. She congratulates him on passing the exam and, with a seductive voice, says she always knew he'd make it from the start. The girl strikes a super provocative pose and offers to help, saying she'd do anything for him. But Blair, totally unfazed, just tells her to get out of the library, to scram. Her plan totally backfires. She's shocked to realize such a cheap trick won't work on him. Blair realizes he was a bit harsh, so he apologizes, but then throws a jab, telling her to leave because he's about to read some books way too complicated for her to understand. Seriously. Alice apologizes for being rude earlier and tells him not to believe anything Molly says, claiming Molly is always talking trash about people. Our guy notices Molly hasn't said a single word about her, and since she's the one bringing it up, she's probably the real gossip, no doubt. To shut her up once and for all, he threatens to call President Elton if she doesn't leave immediately. The girl gets the hint and quickly makes her exit. Finally, with some peace and quiet, Blair can focus on his reading without interruptions. Anyone into magic knows spiritual power depends on your natural talent. The more gifted you are, the faster you level up, no question. Right now, mages know two ways to boost this power, either by meditating or by constantly using magic nonstop. But the author of the book Blair's reading discovered a totally new method. When a mage learns a new technique, it completely drains their spiritual power. However, after resting, not only does the power come back, but their max capacity gets a major boost, a huge increase. So the logic is pretty simple. Blair needs to completely exhaust his magical energy and then let it recover over and over again. By doing this, he can get way stronger, breaking the limits of his own talent, no doubt. The protagonist is super hyped about this and decides to try the technique today. This is his shot at becoming a real deal mage. Without wasting a second, he rushes to his favorite spot near the academy fence in a hurry. But then, out of nowhere, a weird thought hits him and he stops dead with a thoughtful look. He has this annoying feeling he forgot something super important and runs back home. When he gets there, he finds the two girls with insanely annoyed looks on their faces, really pissed off. The reason? He forgot to make them dinner. Blair is shocked at how dependent they are on him. He thinks to himself they're like little helpless pets who can't fend for themselves. Isabella jumps off the table and starts complaining, demanding to know why Blair is so late and hasn't made them any food. Absolutely nothing. Without arguing, he just grabs an apron and puts it on. He explains he was dealing with some stuff in the Magic Society and thought the teacher would cook something. Our guy then asks, "What's the blonde doing here?" And she, looking super excited, rushes to share the news with great enthusiasm. She drops the bomb. Starting today, she's also going to live at the teacher's house. Blair is completely stunned, speechless. The news hits him so hard he drops the frying pan to the floor. His terrible reaction annoys the girl, who can't understand why he's not thrilled to live with someone as amazing as her. Seriously. So Brittany, the teacher, explains that Isabella is moving in with them so it's easier to study magic and math together. Our protagonist doesn't buy that story at all and turns toward the stove, grumbling nervously with suspicion. Blonde Isabella notices he's talking to himself and immediately starts threatening him. Blair decides to ignore the chaos for a moment. He thinks that one way or another, he needs to finish his magic experiments today. No excuses. Finally, dinner is ready, and everyone sits down to eat. Isabella is the first to finish her plate. She lets out a tired but happy sigh, and our guy immediately kills the vibe by telling her to wash the dishes afterward. No delays. After dinner, the group heads to bed. Then, Blair just walks into the bathroom out of nowhere to tell Isabella she forgot to tie her hair again. The problem is he walked in right when the two were changing and ended up seeing the girls completely naked. Our guy turns bright red with embarrassment, and the only response he gets is a slipper flying straight at his face. Time passes, night falls, and everyone gets ready for bed. Blair sits at his desk reading something and thinking about how he has to take care of these girls like they're actual little kids. But suddenly he gets tired of just sitting there, jumps up, and slams his desk hard. He was planning to learn a new technique instead of just dealing with chores, and the moment was now, right this second. Looking at the book, he decides to learn the Firebird technique, which is described right there in great detail. Out of nowhere, someone knocks on the door and the protagonist, already annoyed, asks, "Who is it?" It was Isabella, who decided to come to his room before going to bed to ask him something. Our guy holds back his irritation and tells her to come in. No problem. She says she was worried about having thrown her slipper at his face in the heat of the moment and wanted to know how he felt about it. But Blair realizes this is just an excuse and that she wants to talk about something else, something deeper. So he just asks her straight up what she really wants, no beating around the bush. The girl, embarrassed, says she couldn't sleep and asks him what he's going to do with his life. The protagonist looks surprised, totally not getting the question at all. She explains she only has 1 year left of school and he has 2. She's curious about his plans after graduation. He replies he hadn't even thought about it and will probably just stay at the academy working as a teaching assistant, nothing more. Unable to hold back her feelings, the girl runs up to him and grabs his arm with both hands, squeezing hard. The blonde, with a voice almost pleading, asks if he doesn't want to go to the capital after graduating from the Magic Institute. Her eyes are shining and she says her dad would help him get in and then they could study together with no problem. Honestly, the girl thinks that if that happens, he'd cook for her every day and she feels really good around him, super comfortable. The protagonist gets nervous with her so close and says studying more would be a total waste of time. Right now, he just wants to stay at the academy and study magic. Isabella worries and asks if he can really learn magic properly just at the academy. The guy explains they have Professor Brittany there, and her talent and knowledge are more than enough to teach him without any issues. The girl gets embarrassed hearing the professor's name because she immediately sees her as a rival. That's when her tone changes, saying the protagonist actually just wants to stay there, to be close to Brittany and not her at all. She doesn't even wait for an answer and starts pushing our guy really hard. And right at that moment, the professor walks in to see what's going on. Brittany enters and her eyes widen seeing the girl with such a strange expression. Looks like night really turned into morning, everyone realizing something, and they sat down to eat calmly. Our guy remembers the night before when he tried to exhaust his powers learning new magic with a lot of effort. In the morning, he felt his power had grown, meaning the method really works for real. Suddenly, his thoughts get interrupted by the professor. She starts saying it's way too early for them to be doing that thing she saw in the guy's room, no doubt about it. But our protagonist quickly explains they were just discussing plans for after graduation and she totally misunderstood. Brittany doesn't argue and apologizes for the mistake, but right then Isabella slams her cup hard on the table in anger. Isabella gets super pissed about the whole conversation and everyone can see her frowning, really annoyed. Changing the subject, she says irritated that she has a class and has to leave. No more discussion. The professor, not wanting to make things worse, just nods in agreement. Then, as Isabella gets up from the table, she passes by our guy and purposely elbows him in the face with full intention. Brittany is totally confused and asks if Blair fought with her yesterday, but he says no, that's not what happened. After that, the professor changes the subject and asks if he has some free time that morning. She asks him to deliver an article about numbers to the Math Society. Blair agrees and on the way thinks about how much of a math genius Brittany is because he only gave her a little help and she already did all the research on her own, seriously. Finally, he arrives at a crumbling brick building and starts wondering if this is even the right place, since it looks totally abandoned, lifeless. Inside, things aren't much better. The place is a total mess, with people everywhere and piles of papers scattered on the floor with no order. There's a mustached guy at the counter who tells him if he brought a manuscript, he has to leave it on the shelf, and if he's there to collect a reward, he needs to talk to the manager. Blair says he's there to deliver a manuscript, and the guy looking at him has a really weird, peculiar reaction. The dude recognizes our guy and hesitates for a moment, trying to remember Blair's name. Finally, he gets it and shouts his name so everyone can hear with great enthusiasm. Our protagonist is surprised to have become famous, and a nearby secretary says she saw him at the seminar, no doubt. Out of nowhere, a bunch of people start asking for autographs and bombarding him with non-stop questions. Not expecting this reaction, our guy tries to escape quickly and says he just came to drop off an article from his professor, nothing else. As he leaves, the secretary tells him he can come back anytime to collect his reward. Hearing the word reward, Blair immediately turns around, totally excited, and asks what reward she's talking about with a lot of curiosity. The mustache dude even apologizes because he thought Blair was just there for the cash, for the reward. Trying to keep his cool, Blair asks again what reward they have for him. The mustache man is shocked that Blair has no clue, absolutely none. He explains that the Mathematical Society offers a cash reward to anyone who can solve super tough math problems, seriously complex. And the harder the problem, the more money you get, showing him mysteries no one has cracked, a wall that looks like a bulletin board with what seem like real posters. The guy says these problems were there even before he joined the society, and that he doesn't expect to live long enough to see anyone ever solve them. Blair decides to take this seriously and asks the crowd to leave him alone so he can calmly think of a solution. Then he strikes a pose leaning against the brick wall, pretending to gather mana around him with intense focus. A dude from the society, totally stunned, asks Andre's rep what's up with Blair. The other guy explains they can't distract him because inspiration can hit a genius like him anytime. Suddenly, while the guy stands there, anxiously waiting for a miracle, his buddy next to him tells him to look ahead, pointing at the wall. He says it looks like Blair is already gone, that he disappeared. The man starts freaking out, looking around all confused, wondering where the genius he had so much faith in just vanished to. Meanwhile, the black-haired guy had already left, happily thinking he could score about 500 gold coins just by solving those problems, which were so easy a kid could do them without breaking a sweat. He was broke and couldn't buy new techniques because of that, and he had no idea there was so much gold just waiting there in the Mathematical Society's building. The truth is, he didn't give a damn about advancing math in this world. Honestly, he just wanted the cash. Our main dude runs down the street dancing, even scaring some kids along the way with his wild joy. He thinks the best plan is to solve everything in secret and then just show up to claim the reward. A day passes and everything is super chill at the Mathematical Society. The brown-haired guy even asks Andre why this Blair dude is considered a genius if he just ran off the day before without a word. Andre thinks maybe not even a genius like Blair could solve those problems, since they've been there unsolved for years. Out of nowhere, the door slams open and a huge stack of papers is thrown onto their desk with force. It was our guy deciding to hand everything in at once without waiting. He says he's short on time and demands the reward immediately, no delays. The man, looking totally confused, asks which of the problems was actually solved in those papers, and the protagonist replies that the solutions to all of them are right there, within reach. At that moment, the mustached man goes into shock, staring at the dark-haired guy with total disbelief. The protagonist, disguised as Chen Luo, confirms he solved all 23 problems of the Mathematical Society of Yabo City. Vice President Andre and his colleagues spent the whole day meticulously checking the young man's work. Suddenly, someone shouts excitedly that the mustached man finished verifying everything and all the solutions were completely correct. The people of the Mathematical Society are absolutely stunned, jaws dropped, realizing a true miracle had happened and this young guy solved all their pending problems. Meanwhile, the dark-haired man was already bored of all the praise and just flopped down on a pile of books, taking a nap out of pure boredom. The people around him started losing their minds, some even suggesting they call him the actual god of mathematics. Finally, Andre approaches him with tears in his eyes and gently wakes Blair up. He wakes and asks if they finished reviewing his solutions. After confirmation, everyone around bows deeply in respect and Andre asks the young man his name. In response, he introduces himself as Chen Luo. They finally decide to pay the reward, but the young man politely declines a small part of the money, just to show that his association was barely starting. Blair, still as Chen Luo, wastes no time and heads straight to the Mage Association to spend his cash. He slams the money on the table in front of Molly and says he wants to buy new magic. In the distance, a knight gallops full speed through a fierce storm on his horse. He urges the animal like he's in a mad rush to get somewhere, fearing he won't make it in time. Ahead, He can already see the imposing palace of the Lord of Yabo City standing majestically among several mountains. The knight finally reaches the gate, but the guards stop him. The messenger then announces he carries an order from the capital and must deliver it personally to the city's leader. Upon reaching the Lord's office, the knight hands the letter to a distinguished gray-haired knight. This guy is Azim Clavios, the Lord of Yabo City. As he reads the letter, his face shows confusion, and he asks if what's written is really true. The messenger confirms that some dude named Bird is already in Yabo City. The capital confirmed it, but no one knows exactly where he is. The mayor's wife hears the name Bird and says he's a traitor and a high-level mage who disappeared 3 long years ago. Clavios doesn't get why this guy came back to town, and worriedly says that if he uses his powers, it'll be the end for Yabo City. Meanwhile, our protagonist is sitting in a classroom and suddenly drops his pen on the floor. He dropped it out of pure weakness since he drained all his energy the day before learning the new magic he bought. 500 gold coins weren't enough, and now he's already thinking about how to get more cash. Toby, just to mess with him a bit, comments that Blair always looks tired since he moved in with Brittany. Meanwhile, most of the girls in class are crowded around one of them who drew a picture of the so-called god of math. On the paper, you can see Blair dressed as Chen Luo striking a super manly and heroic pose. Annoyed by the scene, Toby calls the girls dumb and starts grumbling. Seeing this, the protagonist asks what god they're talking about. Toby explains that recently some dude named Chen Luo showed up and solved 23 of the hardest problems in the math community. It's the only thing everyone in the entire Hanan Kingdom talks about. Blair is secretly pleased with his popularity, but at the same time annoyed that his fake name basically became a deity, a divine being. Toby says a guy that good at math must be an old man, not some young kid. Then he changes the subject and asks Blair who he's teaming up with for magic training after class. Our protagonist is surprised and asks why Toby isn't going with him. His friend explains he won't join because his lay is still too low for that. He also warns that second and third year students will be there too, and Blair has a pretty weird reaction to that info. Finally, night falls and it's time for training to start. The instructors explain that the goal is to develop the students' magical skills by giving them a chance to practice everything they've learned. But they make it clear that although practice is important, safety comes first. That's why most of the dangers in the mountains have already been cleared out, but students must be very careful and not stray too far from the designated area. Now they have to split into teams of 3 or 4. The task is to spend one night in the mountains and return by noon the next day. As soon as the explanation ends, Isabella and Alice head straight to Blair. Isabella asks who he plans to team up with so he doesn't have to choose between them and make things awkward. He suggests they all stick together. Alice laughs, finding it super sweet, and says he's got a big heart for wanting to stay with all his friends. She likes the idea. Isabella, on the other hand, gets pretty annoyed because she won't get any alone time with Blair. Seeing the look on her face, the other girl asks if she's willing to join the team. With not many options, the blonde ends up agreeing. Our guy feels relieved the situation didn't turn into a fight. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a distant place behind a mountain. A gray-haired man appears looking out at the horizon. He turns and tells some guy named Bird that the sun has already set. Bird stays silent for a moment, thinking about what to say to his men waiting for orders. Finally, he announces they've reached their destination. Looking at the fog-covered mountain peaks, he says Yabo City won't see tomorrow's sunrise. Back in the mountains where the exam is happening, night has fallen and the sounds of nature take over. A small white rabbit relaxing in the grass suddenly senses someone approaching. Without wasting time, it starts building up fire magic in its mouth and launches a fireball at the intruders. But out of nowhere, just before hitting the target, the fireball simply vanishes in the air. The one who stopped the magic was Isabella, who extinguished the attack with a simple gesture. The girl gets super excited for managing to control magic released by a wild animal. Blair, who was nearby, starts explaining that if the rabbit lost control of the fireball, it wouldn't be able to move. Then suddenly, our guy jumps when someone grabs his ear without warning. It was Isabella. She decides to teach Blair a lesson, telling him not to grab rabbits by their ears. She takes the little creature and holds it against her own chest, petting it gently. Then someone grabs Blair's ear again, but this time it's a much softer tug with no intention to hurt. That person was Alice. She excitedly approaches Blair and asks if it hurts. Picking up the conversation, our guy decides to ask Alice if other animals can use magic too. She confidently confirms it. Alice explains that on the continent of divine grace, people and most animals possess magic. However, usually they only control a single element and can't do anything too complicated. For example, rabbits only control fire and, at best, can conjure some pretty weak and tiny water bubbles. He also mentions that no one knows the answer to that question, Blair asked Professor Anthony. Elsewhere, a man is in the middle of the forest, near a rock, just lost in his thoughts. It turns out this man is Professor Anthony, and a shadowy figure slowly approaches him. Eccles comes up to the professor and asks why he isn't patrolling the mountains. Anthony replies that he's still thinking about the question Blair asked him. The vice principal gets curious and asks what the question was. He explains that our protagonist discovered rabbits can spit fireballs from their mouths and wanted to know why humans can't do the same without using spells or gestures. He pauses here and starts obsessing over it too, getting really worried and wishing for answers. Now both of them are standing in the middle of the forest, overthinking everything way too much. The gray-haired man, Akal, snaps out of his thoughts and tells Anthony he needs to leave and protect the students. The professor, however, remains totally obsessed with the mystery, pointing out that Ale answered the question, but the vice principal gets annoyed, raises his voice, and just orders Anthony to go protect the students once and for all. Meanwhile, Blair's group has decided to take a break and chill by the fire. Isabella, holding her shirt in a pretty suggestive way, says our guy has felt something before and asks, "Who's got more, you or Alice?" Blair sits there dying of embarrassment and says it's really hard to say, but Alice suggests he touch hers again, just to be sure. Isabella raises her voice, declaring her rabbit is bigger and demands our guy admit it. She hands over the creature she caught and asks him to touch it again, but the rabbit doesn't want to stay on her arm and starts struggling to escape. The girl can't hold the creature and just watches in shock as it runs off into the forest. She saw it run toward a hollow log, and now only the creature's tail sticks out. As she approaches the hole, she realizes the animal has gone deeper inside. While Isabella tries to peek into the darkness to see the creature, Alice slowly approaches her. But suddenly, a strange sound starts coming from the hole, and the ground begins to shake. Blair's whole group realizes this is bad and something terrible is about to happen. The ground beneath them cracks and the opening starts widening. Right under the girls, a funnel begins forming, dragging them downward. They fall into a strange room, and a ton of dust and dirt falls on them. Then, Isabella, like a zombie rising from the grave, pulls her hand out of the dirt and starts crawling to get out. She manages to free the top half of her body, then her whole body. Right after that, she finds Alice and helps her up, brushing off the dust. The two lean on each other, trying to process what just happened. I mean, they just fell about 26 feet and came out completely unscathed. Now they're looking at the hole they fell through. Isabella tries to figure out where they are. You can see some wooden planks holding the place up like some kind of tunnel, but Alice, without thinking twice about herself, collapses onto the cold floor, fighting the pain, and starts calling for Blair. Isabella sees her friend is in really bad shape, barely conscious, and tries to get her to respond. She puts a finger near Alice's nose to check if she's breathing and panics because Alice's breathing is getting weaker and weaker. Without hesitation, Isabella starts giving her mouth-to-mouth to try to save her friend. Finally, it works, and Alice suddenly wakes up, sitting up abruptly. She tries to clear her throat and gasps for air. She has a huge coughing fit. Her face turns bright red, but at least she's back to normal. Isabella is super relieved she saved her friend and asks if she's okay. Alice asks, "Where are we?" And Isabella says she has no idea, that they fell through a hole in the mountain and it might be an old abandoned mine. Alice replies she's never heard of any mines near the academy. Then, Isabella points to a door she saw nearby. After a moment, Alice thanks Isabella for saving her life. But Isabella's reaction is super weird. She just looks at her friend with a confused expression. Alice asks, "What's wrong? Why do you look like that?" And Isabella says she just never expected to hear a thank you from her. Meanwhile, outside, everyone felt the earthquake and started panicking. The students were worried they'd fail the exam because the quake scared all the rabbits they needed to hunt. But Archie shows up and calms everyone down. Just then, Anthony arrives running and tells them all the students have been evacuated from the area. He explains the earthquake caught everyone off guard and the teachers did what they could, but no other students have been found yet, and Professor Cook is checking the list to see if anyone's missing. Out of nowhere, everyone hears the sound of horse hooves pounding the ground, a dangerous noise heading straight for them. A group of armed men appears, shouting for everyone to get out of the way. They get closer and closer to the students, who just stare at them completely confused. Professor Anthony wonders, what the hell are these soldiers doing here? And Archie looks at them with a face full of terror. He starts putting the pieces together and says maybe the earthquake wasn't an accident. While all this is happening outside, we cut back to the girls in those mysterious catacombs. Isabella opens that door she saw. The room on the other side is huge, and the two head inside to check it out. Inside, they come face to face with a super weird pillar glowing with a purple light. Symbols float around it, shining the same color. Isabella, without thinking twice, raises her hand to try to read the symbols. But she can't understand them at all and says the writing is way too complex. Since she can't read it, she decides to just touch the pillar and see what happens. Then, out of nowhere, a blast of energy shoots from the pillar straight at her. The energy covers Isabella's whole body and sends her flying about 30 feet backward. Seeing this, Alice rushes over to help her, but Isabella gets up like nothing happened, saying she's fine and that there's probably some really powerful spell on that column. Alice mentions she's seen something similar in some old magic books. According to legend, an ancient civilization built a gigantic copper pillar with magical engravings. Using copper wires, they could create a really strong magical field. Isabella gets curious and asks what that field is for, but Alice doesn't know. She guesses maybe it's for healing or making things grow faster. Then, out of nowhere, a barrage of metal arrows starts flying straight at them. The arrows come from above, gaining speed as they fall like rain on the girls. But the attack isn't very accurate. The arrows, covered in ice as they descend, land just a few feet away from them. They look up to see where the attack came from. Up on the stairs, leaning against the wall, there's a blonde guy holding a giant arrow. He says the girls are pretty skilled. The dude stands there by the railing with a mysterious look in his eyes. Still holding the arrow, Alice decides to speak up and asks, "Who's the armored guy?" He replies that he should be the one asking that, and then, with crazy boldness, tells them they're about to die. Hearing this, the girls look at each other, trying to find a way to escape. Without wasting a second, both start preparing a fire spell to attack the guy, but he just smirks with disdain, watching them try something. He just stands there completely still as a massive fireball flies right at him. Suddenly, the fireball crashes into an ice shield that appeared in an instant. The attack does nothing at all. The guy, without even trying, easily blocked their magic. The girls gape, stunned at how effortlessly he stopped their attack, so the guy decides to close the distance and jumps right over their heads. He lands, sending Isabella flying with a powerful kick, then turns his attention to Alice. While one is on the ground trying to recover, the other gets ready to fight, but she doesn't even have time to react. The guy plants his spear in the wall right next to Alice's head, just to show off. She freezes, not knowing what to do, and the white-haired man gives her a smug smile. The giant metal spear is just inches from her head, and she looks at the weapon in panic. Then the man grabs Alice by the neck with his left hand and starts squeezing. He squeezes hard, making her cough and gasp for air. The white-haired man lifts her off the ground with one hand, continuing to choke her while she struggles to say something, but he's not listening. With a grim expression, he apologizes for something. He says he needs to kill them just as Alice is about to pass out. At that moment, the man pulls a sword from his belt. The guy lunges at the girl, aiming the sword right at her head. The blade hits its mark and a spray of blood splatters the floor, except it didn't hit its intended target. The sword is now stuck in the shoulder of our protagonist. The attacker panics because he never expected him to show up there. Alice looks at Blair, terrified, and sees the blood pouring from his shoulder. At that moment, Isabella finally regains consciousness and screams Blair's name, bursting with joy because he came to save her. She yells at him to be careful just as the attacker is startled by fire bursting out of nowhere. The flames spread and lash at the blonde man like a wild beast. The fire starts burning his body, and the guy is shocked that Blair managed to use magic without even chanting a spell. Then, a massive explosion of fire erupts with the man right in the center. When the dust and smoke start to clear, we see Blair's group safe and sound. Alice and Isabella survive the attack, and now our protagonist is there to protect them. The blonde guy is super worried about his bleeding shoulder, but Blair explains he came through the same hole and followed the two girls. Without taking his eyes off the enemy, he says they'll deal with the wound later. By that time, the villain is already starting to recover from the explosion. We find out he's one of Bird's henchmen, and he's shocked that Blair can use magic even faster than his boss. The white-haired guy decides he has to kill everyone there since they saw what was in the basement. His long metal spear, covered in a thick layer of ice, charges at our guy, ready to strike with all his might. Seeing this, the girls shout for him to be careful, but Blair just stands there waiting for his enemy to get closer. The man is completely baffled by his reaction. His face is a mask of pure shock. That's when he spots a giant mana orb floating right above his head. Looking closer, he realizes it's a water ball technique, and he's even more stunned because Blair cast the spell without making a single move. He also notices the water ball itself has a really weird shape. The orb falls on him, completely enveloping his body. Suddenly, blood starts gushing out of him everywhere, and the blonde guy begins coughing uncontrollably. His eyes fill with rage, and the exposed parts of his body look severely burned. The metal spear, now wet, slips from his blood-soaked hand. He tries to stand up but can only let out a scream. Overwhelmed by the immense power of the attack that hit him, he collapses unconscious to the ground. At the same time, on the surface, we see Bird sitting on a huge rock. He seems deep in thought with an extremely serious expression on his face. One of his men notices and asks what's wrong. Getting up from the rock, Bird looks away and says some rats have managed to infiltrate their ranks. The squad of knights that had passed the students was now far away, running toward the forest. Their commander orders everyone to stop their horses, announcing there's an underground passage just ahead. He orders the men to dismount and get ready to enter. It turns out the leader of the bandit group is a highly trained warrior named Berth, a high-level mage and an extremely dangerous dude. One of his subordinates then taps the captain on the shoulder and points ahead. There, not far away, a lone mage with a staff stood in the middle of the path blocking their way. It was none other than Byrne himself. He turns to the knights like old friends and simply informs them the passage is completely sealed. Without a second thought, the knights decide to go all out, launching a full frontal assault. They line up one behind the other, waiting for their commander's signal. One of the knights even turns to the one behind him and tells him to stop following so closely. Full of bravado, they finally charge at the mage, and the clearing echoes with their battle cries. The scene shifts to a dark-haired knight on the ground with his head covered in blood. He has dropped his sword and lies in the mud, struggling to breathe among his fallen comrades, while a torrential rain pours non-stop. Regaining consciousness, surrounded by the bodies of men and horses, he clutches his head in deep agony. That night, Ethan realizes he's the only survivor of the brutal massacre. Out of nowhere, he hears a voice calling his name from one of the nearby bodies. It's his uncle who is still desperately clinging to life. The young man runs to his uncle and looks at him with tear-filled eyes. His uncle's legs are gone and Ethan starts feeling overwhelming rage at what happened to him. But the older knight tells his nephew not to worry and hands him something saying he needs to finish the mission. Ethan panics, saying he can't do it. He explains the mage defeated an entire army alone, that Bird killed his commander without anyone's help, and that he could crush him with a single finger. The boy tries to save his uncle by holding on to him, but the man is only focused on the mission and begs his nephew once more to complete it. As he pleads with Ethan to save the city of Yabo, his uncle's hands loosen, and he collapses to the ground. The young knight realizes his uncle has finally died and is completely overwhelmed by emotion. Filled with despair and rage, Ethan starts screaming like a lunatic. Meanwhile, deep in the same dungeon where Blair's group was, something else was happening. After taking down Bird's henchmen, the girls finally got the chance to tend to our guy's wound. Isabella was super curious about how the protagonist could use magic without a chant, but he denied everything. Not getting a clear answer, the girl simply pressed hard on his wound. Blair, having received that blow, let out a scream of pain and started writhing on the floor. After that, Alice advises Isabella to be gentler, but the blonde replies that he didn't need to show off his skills. Anyway, their attention now focused on a mysterious pillar in the middle of the room. Alice says she read in a book that the pillar created some kind of magical formation. They didn't know exactly what it was for, but they were sure the earlier earthquake had something to do with it. Alice also comments on the guy who attacked them, and apparently this whole system is way more complicated than it seems. Blair says they need to find a way out of there fast and report everything they've seen. He says he doesn't want to handle this alone, but out of nowhere, a sword is pressed against his throat. The girls look and see a man standing right behind Blair and start to panic. A knight had sneaked up without anyone noticing, and now the blade of his sword is pressed right against our protagonist's neck. The armored guy then asks the group who they are and what they're doing there. Realizing the knight was distracted for a split second, Blair moves fast, reaches out his hand, grabs the guy's forearm, and in one quick move ducks out from under the blade. The knight's face shows total shock at our dark-haired guy's skill. Taking advantage of the guy's hesitation, Blair instantly goes on the offensive, grabs the knight's arm, twists it behind his back, and locks in an armbar. With the dude immobilized, he warns the girls that the knight isn't alone. He has a partner. Isabella just stares at the brown-haired knight with a surprised look on her face and an interest she doesn't even try to hide. The knight, whose name is Ethan, demands Blair let him go, yelling that if he doesn't, the whole city of Yabo will be destroyed. Hearing this, Blair just freezes, staring at the armored guy completely dumbfounded. The whole group around our protagonist gets curious and asks, what did he mean by that? After finally releasing Ethan, he starts to explain, and Isabella insists on more details. The knight reveals that the capital had known for a few days that a guy named Bird had invaded the city, but no one had been able to find him. The problem is they had no idea how strong this Bird guy was. Blair, hearing all this, asks innocently, who's this Bird that everyone's so scared of? Then the whole group bursts out laughing because it's crazy that our guy knows absolutely nothing. Alice then starts explaining. She says Bird is, basically, the most famous and dangerous criminal in the Long Kingdom. Like, even little kids know his name, and to make things worse, he used to be a general in the royal army. The dude isn't just good at fighting, he's also a top-tier mage with massive magical power. He was like the biggest name in the kingdom, but no one expected that in the middle of a battle, he and his army would just switch sides and betray everyone. Since that day, he's been completely off the grid. The king even offered a huge bounty for his head, but to this day, no one's come close. Then Isabella turns to the knight and asks for more details about this Bird. She wants to know if it's true that he came to Yabo City just for that structure and what that thing actually does. Ethan, with a terrified look on his face, says the magical system can destroy the entire city. Blair's crew can't believe it and asks again if he's serious, if the whole city could really be wiped off the map. The knight then explains that the formation is made up of 118 pillars scattered inside the mountain, and no one knows who put them there or why. What they do know is that this structure has been there for over 1,000 years. 10 years ago, the city leader found out and called a group of mages to investigate. The mages discovered this formation is way more powerful than current magic. If activated at full power, it would generate enough energy to destroy all of Yabo. Since there was no safe way to dismantle it, they sealed off the area and made it a top-secret location. The knight has no idea how this bird guy managed to turn it on, but the fact is the formation is now active. Blair starts wondering how they're going to shut this thing down. That's when Ethan shows them a magic stone in his hand and says that'll help. Blair's team just stares at the stone, totally confused, so Ethan explains. The formation has a bunch of pillars, but there's one main one, the one that connects everything, and this stone he's holding was found right next to that master pillar. The mages ran some tests and saw that just bringing the stone close to the pillar drastically reduces the formation's power, and if you touch the stone directly to the pillar, it loses all its power. Blair gets it immediately. Their mission is to find that main pillar. Ethan agrees but warns that Bird is way stronger than they think. Our protagonist suggests the knight call as many soldiers as possible to help with the mission, but he replies it's already too late to ask for reinforcements and they need to handle this fast. That's because in 1 hour, the formation will reach full power. Ethan puffs up his chest and says he's the only one who can find the pillar and everyone else needs to hide in a shelter since they're civilians. But right in the middle of this heroic speech, Blair, holding back laughter, points at the guy's pants and says he didn't want to interrupt his moment of bravery. Ethan, feeling all important and powerful, looks down and is totally shocked. There's a huge wet stain right in his crotch. The dude's face turns as red as a tomato and he starts stammering, making up an excuse that it was the rain that soaked his pants. So, out of nowhere, Isabella jumps up from her chair with an annoyed look, like she's about to say something. She declares that her family, the Nails, has protected Yabo City for generations and it's their duty to help. Then she announces she's coming with them to disable the system. Right then, Blair hears that the bounty on Bird's head is 100,000 gold coins and his jaw drops at the insane amount of cash. That's when Ethan finally clicks and realizes the girl in front of them is Isabella, the mayor's daughter. Hearing about the bounty, our protagonist gets hype, slaps the knight on the shoulder, and declares that protecting Yabo is his duty as a good citizen too. Seeing her friend's attitude, Alice also decides she's not running away and agrees to go with them. The knight gets pretty pumped seeing their courage, realizing they actually want to help the city. To totally kill the vibe, one of them suggests the knight should change his pants first. Ethan, of course, gets super pissed at the teasing. Meanwhile, a group of mages is gathered around a mysterious magical barrier. They're throwing every spell they've got trying to punch a hole in it, but nothing works. The giant dome just shrugs off all their attacks. One mage turns to a guy named Elton and says his magic isn't doing a damn thing to the barrier. Another called and says they should wait for the president to come back, but the vice president kills the mood by telling them the president's heading to the capital and won't be back until tomorrow morning. Out of nowhere, the mayor of Yabo shows up in front of them and asks how things are going. Elton explains that even with all the mages combined, they haven't even scratched the barrier. The group leader explains the vanguard already got past the barrier and found a plaque with something written on it. Now all they can do is wait for him. Meanwhile, walking through some underground tunnels with the team, Ethan suddenly blurts out that this mission is way too dangerous, but then Blair spins around and smacks him on the back of the neck. The knight isn't happy about getting hit like that and asks why she hit him right near the spiderweb. Just then, he feels something moving on his neck and looks for it. He sees his hand and spots a yellow spider with a white head. The dude can't even look at the thing and just bolts, screaming like a maniac. In his panic, his foot hits a plate on the floor that sinks under his weight. At the last second, Blair manages to yank Ethan back by his clothes, saving his head from a flying arrow. Realizing he almost got killed, the knight thanks our protagonist. Our guy then warns the group that this place is loaded with traps and asks if they're sure they want to keep going. Ethan, however, is super confident. He says he knows a secret path from the core. According to him, there are several routes to the main pillar room, but they all go through the main door, where that Bird dude is definitely standing guard. He knows they don't stand a chance if they have to fight Bird head-on, so he's going to lead the group through a shortcut that skips the main door. The plan is to sneak into the room, place the piece on the pillar, and bail out of there fast. Blair's curious and asks, "How do you know about this secret passage?" Ethan explains he has a degree in history and can read ancient texts. One day he found a map in the palace and now knows all the dungeon's secret tunnels. The dark-haired guy asks why a historian ended up in the army. The knight explains it's hard for a historian to find a job and his uncle, who served in the royal army, got him this position and this is his first mission. Blair thinks frustrated that even in this world, getting a job is a total headache, just like back in his old world. Finally, Ethan finds a section of the hallway wall that looks different. He presses a panel and it sinks inward. The walls beside them open up, revealing a new passage for Blair's team. Ethan says from here they can go straight to the main hall and finish the mission. Meanwhile, Bird, One of his men reports that the outer barrier is working perfectly and the enemies still haven't broken through. Bird comments that the defense system is pretty solid and suddenly asks about a guy named Sid. His servant replies that Sid went to patrol the west sector and never came back. Bird looks thoughtfully at the main pillar and the writings around it, thinking another rat has sneaked in. At that exact moment, Blair and his team start making their way through the secret passage. They reach a staircase leading directly to the main hall, and the dark-haired guy decides to peek inside to check the situation. After making sure the coast is clear, he opens the secret passage hatch disguised as part of the floor. Finally, the gang steps out of that narrow corridor, and their jaws drop at the size of the room. Isabella comments that the place is huge, but there's only one energy orb there and not the pillar they were looking for. Apparently, the pillar turned into this orb after being activated. Then, Ethan finds a plaque on the ground with instructions on how to raise the pillar. Again, he starts reading aloud what's written, and something weird begins to happen. Out of nowhere, a small pillar appears, completely wrapped in a purple glow. Ethan explains it'll take a few minutes to fully rise, while Alice cheers that they brought the knight with them. She's surprised that, despite being such a scaredy cat, he's taking the task seriously, trying to impress the girl. Ethan immediately starts bragging, saying he's a soldier from Yabo City and that citizen safety always comes first. Blair smacks him on the head to stop pretending to be someone he's not. With a serious face, the knight says he's doing this for his uncle. He explains his father died when he was a kid, and his uncle raised him, becoming like a second dad. But Bird killed his uncle and the rest of the soldiers. Now, all he wants is revenge.